Thud, thud, thud. Kage-sensei, I can't help me, then no one can, mumbled a short, spiky blonde boy wearing an orange and blue tracksuit as he threw punches towards a wooden stump, keeping his punches at even speeds. Thud, thud, thud. All because Sasuke is an Uchiha and has a bloodline. Who cares, he's just another orphan with fancy eyes, screamed the blonde-haired boy as he threw a punch that had cracked the piece of wood in front of him before slowly turning to his side and sliding down the wood towards the ground covered in grass. Why? Why is it only me who has nobody? Why is it always Naruto Uzumaki who gets the short stick? Why only me? Cried Naruto a bit as he wiped the tears away from his eyes as he huddled against the tree. Sniff. Maybe if I win the Chunin exams, Kakashi-sensei will train me, said Naruto to himself, reigniting his spirit. Jumping to his feet, Naruto began to stretch. Yeah, that's it. Maybe if I win the Chunin exams, Kakashi-sensei will train me more than Sasuke, thought Naruto as he was getting into position to run. Gurgle. Naruto's sweat dropped while he looked at his stomach. The thing acted like it had a mind of its own. Ah, damn it. I'm hungry, but I can't stop training, said Naruto to himself as he started to think of different options. He could just quickly run over to Ikaraku's and then run back. Or he could just ignore his stomach and continue training. After all, he had a month to train starting tomorrow. Naruto looked down. If only he could be in two places at once. At that moment, a magical light bulb appeared over Naruto's head. Naruto slammed a clenched fist into his other opened hand. Yes, Kage Bushin. How could I forget that? Screamed Naruto as he placed his hands into the seal to summon his favorite technique, while second as sexy technique was just brilliant. Poof. Soon the small clearing was filled with hundreds of Narutos. Naruto looked around himself before sighing. Ever since the Forest of Death and Orikipido touched him in the stomach, he hasn't been able to use his chakra any good. Okay everyone, but one clone dispel please, said Naruto as he rubbed his forehead with his hand. Poof. Soon there was only one clone that was in a saluting position. Sir, yes sir, said the clone looking like an Umbu does when talking to the Hokage. Naruto grinned. Clone Naruto, this is an important mission. You must get me 10 miso ramens and pronto. Failure will result in my stomach exploding and we never getting to taste ramen again, said Naruto as he pointed at his clone, which had a look of fear. Sir, yes sir, screamed the clone as he dashed away, leaving Naruto all by himself in the clearing. Naruto looked at the dust cloud the clone had left and scratched his head. How was the clone going to pay for the ramen? Oh well, he will see when the clone comes back. Naruto looked back at his training ground. He had found the place before the graduation exam and hang out here from time to time. It was a massive clearing that held heaps of trees around it along with a decent-sized waterfall at the edge of the clearing. Naruto started to go back into his running position, mentally counting down from 3. 3, 2, 1, go. Screamed Naruto from within his own conscience as he forced his body to move as fast as he could, which was pretty fast for a Genin. He seemed to be just at an experienced Genin speed, which was just under a rookie Chunin's. Come on, Naruto. You can go faster. You can do better, screamed Naruto as he tried to force his muscles more and continued running, which actually made him go slightly faster. This continued for a few minutes before Naruto suddenly tripped and grabbed his head. Ouch, what the hell was that? Said Naruto, starting off in a loud voice which slowly had become quiet as he slowly started to forget about his newly scrapped knee and slowly remembered him rushing to Ikaraku's before giving him a bowl for free as he forgot his money, and then him rushing out of Ikaraku's, and then barreling into a crate full of kunai, and then popping. Naruto started to panic and look himself over before realizing something. He didn't do that. That was his clone. Did he? Did he just remember what his clone did? I thought that Kage Bushin was only a physical clone. I need to read the rest of the technique information, mumbled Naruto to himself as he only looked at how to make the technique and not what it did, well except for making clones that could hit people. I'll just ask Gigi now instead, said Naruto as he left his special clearing towards the Hokage Tower, on the other side of the village. 3 hours later. I should have just run here, muttered Naruto, as it was now late evening. He walked up the stairs towards the Kage Tower. Looking up towards the top, he saw his Gigi. But before Naruto could call out to him, he disappeared. Well, looks like it was time for Operation FS. Well, it looks like I will need Operation Forbidden Scroll after all, said Naruto, as he sighed a bit. Continuing his walk, he went towards his objective. Walking around to the back of the Hokage Tower, Naruto's sweat dropped. The construction setup was still there which he had used to sneak in the first time, and so was the same window at the very top. Gigi was defiantly too old to be Hokage if he lets his ninjas forget the windows. Naruto saw the ledge that he had to grab and saw the ramp still there. Naruto once again got into a running position before sprinting up the ramp and launching him up and grabbing the ledge. Twisting his body around a bit, he saw the next platform he had to land on. Placing his feet on the rocky surface, he pushed against it while jumping towards the platform to make sure he didn't underjump it. Tucking into a ball position, Naruto rolled against the platform before coming to a stop right in the middle of the platform. Standing up, Naruto looked at the window that was right next to him. Poking his head in and moving it left and right, Naruto slowly entered the building, making sure to avoid the chattering of other shinobi within the building. Walking up to the Hokage's office, Naruto sent a hand inside of his orange jacket and pulled a key that he had. The key was special as it was a direct copy of the key his Gigi had, even down to the squiggly lines that adorn it. Placing the key into the keyhole, he slowly twisted it and quietly opened the door, quickly shutting it as quietly as he could. He quietly moved across the room towards the massive bookcase that held a lot of village secrets. Naruto, with key in hand, opened the bottom drawer and saw a keyhole near the back. Doing what he had done to the door, Naruto quietly twisted the key once he placed it inside the keyhole. Clink. Taking the key out, he watched as a hidden drawer appeared from the back of the bookcase. Inside was the forbidden scroll along with 3 scrolls with his name on it. While he knew that this was a new hiding place of the forbidden scroll, he was shocked that there were 3 scrolls addressed to him. Shrugging, he grabbed the 3 scrolls and placed them in his orange jacket. Grabbing the forbidden scroll, he quickly opened it up and fully read what the Kagebushin did. He was amazed that he didn't read this when he could have. His Kagebushin could be used for training, well, for anything other than physical training. In the scroll, it said that the technique was created by the second Hokage, Tobirama Senju, for spying technique, as you could send a Kagebushin to scout out an area before going in yourself. The reason this was a good espionage technique was because of the memory share, which lets the user gain all the memories from his Kagebushins when they dispelled. Although Naruto wouldn't have come to the training conclusion if he hadn't read that it could also be used for training and studying. Naruto was giddy. He could actually one-up Sasuke. Sure, while the team could copy any ninjantai, he couldn't actually learn the ins and outs of the technique. He could learn anything in a matter of hours. While Naruto was in his inner monologue, he hadn't read the caution section. Yes, I'm going to be the best ever Hokage, said Naruto as he jumped up to his feet, scratching the back of his right hand which had drawn blood. Gah, said Naruto as he dropped the forbidden scroll and threw his hand, wildly spraying blood over the Hokage's portraits due to the shock of being cut. Naruto caught his right hand in a tight grip as he watched the blood he threw on the Hokage's start to disappear. Well, all the Hokage's except for Gigi's. Poof. Thud, thud, thud. Naruto looked at the 3 scrolls that had popped out of the now cleaned portraits. Looking down towards the scrolls, he saw that they were each meant for someone who had their blood. But how did he get the scrolls then? He was sure he wasn't Senju or Namikaze. So, how did he open the secret portraits? Leaning down towards the scrolls, he quickly placed the 3 scrolls into his jacket. Quickly gazing at some of the recorded techniques, he got interested in a few of them. The first was the Rasengan, which the steps made it easy to understand. However, if it was in the forbidden scroll, it must be hard to learn. Another one was the Hiraishin no Jutsu. However, it commented how you needed a high knowledge of Fuin Jutsu to even try to think of how to create a similar technique to the Hiraishin, as the steps weren't written down. The next one was called Edo Tensei, and it revived dead shinobi for a little bit if the user had some of their blood for the summoning, and if there was a body for them to inhabit. Those were the only ones who actually interested him. Sure, the Infinite Darkness Jinjutsu sounded cool, but since people said he had bad chakra control, he couldn't use Jinjutsu to save his life. Seeing as how he got what he wanted, Naruto pulled out a notepad that he always carried with him for pranking ideas. Quickly flipping pages of the little notebook, which was nearly full, he wrote down the steps to the Rasengan, Hiraishin, and Edo Tensei. Okay, Naruto, almost there. Just got to place the scroll back and get out of here, said Naruto to himself, as he could feel his heartbeat going full pelt as he placed the forbidden scroll back into its place and locked the secret cupboard. Standing up, Naruto quickly wiped the blood of his Gigi's portrait and used his ki to open the door slowly and walking out quietly. Closing the door behind him, Naruto moved throughout the building towards the open window. Climbing through the window, Naruto slowly walked across the platform and jumped to the ledge before dropping down to the ramp, which he slid from. Naruto gripped his heart as he finally got out of the building, not alerting any ninjas within. Thank Kami that Gigi took his umbu with him, or I would have been caught instantly, said Naruto to himself as he started to walk towards the steps that would lead him to Konoha. Hour later. God damn it, those steps take forever to climb, muttered Naruto to himself as he was walking with his hands behind his head as he was walking towards his apartment. Maybe he should just go sleep at his training ground? He did have a makeshift house there, and if he was always there, he would be able to train day in and day out. Agreeing that would be the best idea, Naruto headed towards his apartment to leave a note for his Gigi to find later on. Naruto's apartment. Opening his door with his key, Naruto turned on the lights and walked through his small apartment and walked into his room. Looking for his travel bag, he quickly opened it and pushed in some of his jumpsuits and some ramen preserves. Going under the bed, he pulled out a loose floorboard that held some of his hidden supplies. In the small hidden compartment were blood pills, chakra pills, and food pills. Each was self-explanatory. Blood pills made your body produce more blood, so that if you start bleeding badly, you could survive a little longer than normal, although it puts a huge stress on your body later on. The chakra pills replenished your chakra, however, each time you take it, and it increases the fatigue you will feel and the chakra exhaustion when you stop taking the pills after each time you run out of chakra. The food pills just filled you up for a few hours, although it doesn't give you the nutrition that regular food gives. Next to the supply of pills was his hidden money box, which held hundreds of thousands of yen, which he had saved up from since his young years. Along with the box of money was his fox mask. He didn't know why he had chosen that mask as a child, but it just seemed right at the time. Picking up the mask, he held it to his face and walked towards the bathroom and looked himself in the mirror. He tried to hide it, but it looked right on him for some reason. Throwing his fox umbu mask into his travel bag, he went back under the floorboard and grabbed his large supply of medical equipment, which was sealed in a scroll. He threw it into the bag as well. The reason for this is when Naruto was smaller, he used to patch up animals he found in the forests around or in Konoha, which eventually led him to learning some medical things for both animals and humans. It was kind of a hobby of Naruto's. Seeing as he was done moving his items, he closed the bag before standing up and walking towards his apartment's entrance. Turning off the light as he walked past, he closed the door behind him and locked it. Naruto started to walk towards the training grounds, making the passing ninjas think that he was going to train at one of the regular training grounds. Walking past all the training grounds, he started to sprint towards his secret place. With an hour of sprinting, Naruto finally reached his secret training ground. Well, I might as well sleep now as it's becoming dark, said Naruto as he looked towards the sky, which had just started to show some stars above. 8 hours later. Yawn. Why did I have to wake myself up so early? Groaned Naruto as he fell of his hand, made hammock hidden within the cave behind the waterfall. Naruto looked at himself and shuffled his jacket a little and felt all the scrolls he still had on him. Well, it's a good time to read them, I guess, Naruto thought as he walked around the ice-cold waterfall. Walking towards the center of the clearing, Naruto placed all the scrolls in front of him in 2 piles. The ones on his left were the ones that fell from the Hokage's portraits, while the ones on the right were the ones which were with the forbidden scroll. Naruto scratched his head with his right hand, wondering which one he should open first. Well, the Hokages were his heroes, and he could always read the other ones after. So grabbing the 3 Hokage scrolls, Naruto tried to open them, only for them not to budge. What? But these fell from the floor when my blood. Alright, I might need my blood to open it, said Naruto as he slapped his forehead for forgetting. But before doing that, Naruto placed his hands into the Kagebushin hand sign. Kagebushin no Jutsu. After the shout, multiple poofs of smoke could be heard. Naruto looked at his small army of 200 clones with a nod. Okay guys, everyone go on a tree walking training, okay? Kage-sensei told me that my chakra control is the worst, so we should work on that for now, said Naruto. He watched his clones nod before going towards a separate tree and began the tree walking exercise. Naruto then looked back at the scrolls with his heart pounding within his chest. Slowly bringing his right hand up towards his mouth, he sent some chakra into his canine tooth and bit his thumb. He quickly drizzled the scrolls in his blood before the wound healed itself. Suddenly 3 poofs sounded off, and what appeared shocked Naruto to his core. The 3 dead Hokage. The first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. The second Hokage, and Hashirama's brother Tobirama Senju. And finally his personal favorite out of all the Hokages, the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze. 3 living legends stood in front of Naruto, and he could not believe it before his mind popped up and thought of something. Ah, ghost, screamed Naruto as he dived into the lake head first, which brought a sweat drop from the 4th Hokage for some reason. The Kages looked at each other before looking at the scrolls on the ground, and was shocked that all 3 of them appeared. Especially Minato, as he was sure that if his scroll was used at Naruto would only be able to use his. He wasn't expecting him to be able to summon the 1st and 2nd Hokage, but that means that Naruto was related to the first 2 Kage. While Minato was in his inner monologue, Tobirama was getting annoyed with his direct family member hiding from them in the lake. So he used his water manipulation to summon a water whip and drag Naruto out of the lake. Naruto was shitting himself now. He was certain they were ghosts, even if they weren't see-through or if they were able to use ninjutsu. Naruto soon found himself suspended off the ground by the 2nd Hokage's water whip. Hashirama, who had been quiet since being summoned, smiled at Naruto and gave a little wave. Hi there, I guess, since you were able to summon me, Tobirama, and who are you? Asked Hashirama with a question mark above his head as he looked at Minato, who looked shocked for a bit before scratching his head in embarrassment. Oh right, never met. My name's Minato Namikaze, 4th Hokage, said Minato as he turned his back to Hashirama and Tobirama, showing his Hadori to them both, along with Naruto, who was having a fanboy moment. Who cares if they were ghosts? That was one cool Hadori in pose. Hashirama seemed to nod before he realized something. Okay, if you're the 4th Hokage and you're dead, then who is the 5th? Asked Hashirama with his head tilted a bit, while Tobirama simply rose an eyebrow, also wondering who. Minato scratched his head as he actually didn't know. However, he was saved by Naruto. Gigi's the Hokage, said Naruto with his arms folded as he was still suspended midair and upside down. Hashirama looked at Naruto and asked who this Gigi was. Naruto looked confused at how Hashirama didn't know who Gigi was, but then again he forgot that not everyone knew that he could the 3rd Hokage granddad. Oh, he's the 3rd Hokage, and even though he's an old man, he's still cool, said Naruto as he was slightly starting to feel all the blood going to his head and giving him a headache. Looking towards the 2nd Hokage, Naruto asked him to let him down, which the 2nd Hokage thought of for a bit, before reluctantly letting the boy go, only to watch as Naruto fell head first into the ground. Ow! What the hell was that for Databeo? Said Naruto, letting his verbal tick pop up by accident. For some strange reason, the 4th Hokage smiled at his verbal tick. Tobirama looked at Naruto for a bit before turning to his brother. He's from your side of the family, said Tobirama, making Hashirama laugh along with Minato. Naruto just watched as 2 of the 3 Kage laughed a bit before getting annoyed. Hey, can you please tell me how you are alive? Asked Naruto as he pointed towards the Kages, who nodded their heads. Hashirama stepped forward as he began to explain. Okay, so as you see, you managed to release us 3 from the 3 scrolls in front of you, which means you are related to us, either by your father or your mother, said Hashirama as he stepped back and watched as Tobirama moved forward. In basic, since you are blood family. As such, we had created these scrolls for our family if they needed help in any situation. So why did you summon us? Asked Tobirama as he watched Naruto scratch his head a bit. Well, I kind of accidentally found these scrolls when I went to see what the Kagebushin really did, said Naruto, grinning a bit before seeing shock appear on the second Hokage's face. Tobirama moved forward along with the other Kages, which made Naruto somewhat have some fear wash over him. Tobirama looked him dead in the eye. Why would you need to know what the Kagebushin does? You shouldn't be able to even attempt it with your currently low levels of chakra and lack of control, said Tobirama, as he saw Naruto look at him confused before pointing at the general direction of his clones. When the previous Hokage saw the amount of clones there were, they panicked. Naruto, dispel your clones. One at a Tobirama was cut off by the sounds of hundreds of poofs. All the Kage looked at Naruto, expecting to be on the floor dead from all the strain of the Kagebushins exploding at the same times and Naruto experiencing their collective memories. Naruto just stared at the three Kage with his head tilted. He didn't feel anything other than a better sense of control over his chakra, which for some reason made him more relaxed instead of more hyper. What? Asked Naruto as he looked at the shocked faces of all the Kage in front of him. How, mumbled Tobirama as he watched Naruto stand like he wasn't affected by the strain of the Kagebushins. Hashirama simply grinned. If Naruto was able to survive that and not feel a thing, he could be the next Kami no Shinobi in a few years. Minato smiled proudly. His son was as tough as diamonds if he could survive that, and looked like it didn't bother him. Tobirama soon got over his shock. Well, it seems that training you for the next month will be quite entertaining, said Tobirama with a grin stretching across his face, which was mirrored by the other Kage. Naruto suddenly felt like he was walking into hell. Faster, Naruto! Screamed Minato as he threw his Hiraishin Kunai towards Naruto, who was running on nothing but fumes. It has been 10 days since Naruto's training had begun, and the Kages were impressed at Naruto's learning rate, even without the clones helping him with nearly everything. When the Kages first began training Naruto, they noticed that he didn't have any survivor skills. They found this out when they sent him to get some food for himself, as they were nothing but upgraded Kagebushin, as Naruto learned after their first meeting. The Kages waited for half an hour before finding Naruto battling 3 grizzly bears that were a few miles out from their location. How did Naruto get a few miles away while looking for food? They will never know. When Tobirama had asked Naruto who taught him all he knew, the small child had instantly fell silent and only murmured his answers. When the Kages heard his answers, the first 2 Hokage only felt sympathy towards the child. However, the 4th Hokage went to his knees and hugged the boy and silently cried. When Naruto asked why he was crying, Minato explained to him about him being Naruto's father and about how his wife should have been there to look after him, unless she was also dead. All through the night, Naruto wept as the 3 Kage watched him overcome his grief and sadness of the chance of never meeting his mother, although at least he met his father, kinda. On the second day of training, Tobirama had made Naruto summon as much clones as he could as the day before, only to be able to summon 50 Kagebushins when using the same amount of chakra he had used the previous day. That day's experience gave Naruto something else to work along with everything else he was training in. Flashback 9 days ago. Gra, why can't I summon how many clones I want? I know my control was heaps better than yesterday, even if it was only like 15 minutes worth of chakra control, said Naruto loudly as he continued trying to summon 200 clones like the day before, but no matter what, he wasn't able to summon over 100 clones at max. While Naruto was continuously trying to resummon 200 clones, Tobirama was sitting in a relaxed stance and was feeling out Naruto's chakra for any anomaly that was preventing him from using his chakra properly. Tobirama sensed how Naruto's chakra would emerge from his stomach and noticed something. His chakra was being scrambled from his core. Standing up, Tobirama called Hashirama and Minato towards him and Naruto, who had taken to sitting down onto the ground after another failed attempt. Tobirama looked at Naruto for a bit before lifting his jacket and shirt up, exposing his stomach to the 3 Kages. For Hashirama, he had no clue what he was looking at. Sure, his wife Mito had taught him some sealing, but he had always fallen asleep during her lectures. For Tobirama, it was an ingenious seal that would disrupt a person's chakra, and if they were a Jinchuriki, would block them from accessing their tailed beast's energy. However, since it was new to Tobirama, it would take him a while to learn the counter seal for it. However, for Minato, it was simple. Moving his hand towards Naruto's stomach, he placed his hand on the 5-prong seal and slowly twisted the seal open. However, Minato noticed a seal behind the five-pronged seal, and if he was correct, it was a bloodline blocking seal, used when a child gains an ability that no one wants them to know about. The only ones who knew that technique were the clan heads and the Hokage. Probably Danzo as well. Naruto, I am going to unseal your chakra and another seal that shouldn't be on you, okay? Said Minato, looking straight at Naruto's eyes, who gave him a nod in return. With all the insurance he needed, he quickly spun his hand counterclockwise and broke both seals that had taken place on Naruto's stomach. After making sure that the QB seal was not harmed, he went to the other Kages. Naruto just watched as he could feel his chakra getting back to normal, along with noticing that his whisker marks disappeared from his face while looking at a puddle next to him. He watched as the Kages all sent glances at him through most of their conversation. Deciding to relax a bit, Naruto laid down and closed his eyes, only to be able to somehow see the three Kages in a sort of mind map. While he was looking through his mind map, he watched as the Kage moved towards him before they held something out to him. Naruto opened his eyes and saw a blank piece of paper being held above him. Turning his eyes to the Kage, Hashirama started to explain. Okay, Naruto. The paper in front of your face is called chakra paper. Chakra paper comes from trees that are fed chakra over a prolonged amount of time and can identify someone's chakra type when the person inserts their own chakra into the paper. So all we need you to do is send some chakra into the paper and see your elements, said Hashirama as he watched as Naruto took the paper out of his hand. The Kages watched in anticipation as Naruto used a bit of his chakra and placed it within the special paper. Soon the paper split into three separate pieces. The first piece was completely covered in water. The second piece had turned into pure dirt, and the third piece was zapping the entire paper and making it close up into a ball. The Kages just watched as Naruto had 4 elements: wind, water, earth, and lightning. But before any of them could tell Naruto what his elements were, the water and earth pieces slipped through Naruto's fingers and fell to the ground, where they merged into a small plant. At this, Hashirama just jumped with joy. He finally had someone to pass his teachings on to. However, he could only do it for 30 days. Present. Naruto, you can do better, said Minato as he teleported around the clearing and threw more kunai at Naruto, as he was also dodging small water dragons and wood dragons. Naruto looked at all his teachers with evil eyes as he continued to dodge all the attacks his senseis had thrown at him. Naruto had looked back at how this training helped him. Hashirama, Minato, and Tobirama had made his clones train in elemental manipulation for all his elements, which was around 50 clones per group. Then Hashirama's medical training, which Naruto enjoyed very much. Tobirama's chakra control training, which had him soaked to the bone as he had to do waterfall climbing while carrying the 3 pervious Kage on his back, which annoyed the hell out of him. Then his 2 Sans Taijutsu training, which actually fit him. Then were Fuinjutsu lessons between Tobirama and Minato, along with slight insight into space-time ninjutsu, his now new favorite subject. Because of those training sessions, he had been able to rise from solid Genin to mid-Chunin in skills. Experience? About mid-Genin. This brought his overall stats to about high Genin. Naruto watched as he continued to dodge all his sensei's attacks, and slowly a grin formed on his face. He would so kick Niji's ass. Chunin Exam Final Stadium. Everyone there for the Chunin exams was a buzz. The Chunin exams were held every 6 months in each hidden village so that the Kages could show off their up-and-coming shinobi to future employers and future enemies. The third Hokage gave a sigh. It had been 1 whole month since he had seen Naruto Uzumaki, and he was getting worried. He had arranged Jiraiya meet him and train him for the Chunin exams when he heard that Kakashi was training the Uchiha, but alas, Jiraiya didn't want to, and now Naruto probably stood no chance. Hiruzen looked up and saw that everyone was getting restless. He would need to start the Chunin exams soon or people would become angry and it would affect Konoha badly. Looking towards the contestants, he saw that there was only 6 in total standing there. The 3 Genin missing were Naruto, Sasuke, and Dosu from Sound. If Sasuke was to come late, people would force him into giving the Uchiha more time to appear, but if Naruto was late by even a nanosecond, he would be disqualified. Hiruzen sighed. It looked like Naruto wouldn't be able to try gain position of Chunin. Walking towards the edge of the balcony, and putting a face on as he noticed the Kazekage enter the Kage booth with his 2 guards, he called out towards the fans. "The Chunin exams will now begin," screamed Hiruzen as he watched the crowd go wild from his proclaim. Walking back a bit, he sat down on his chair waiting for the fights. Soon the protector of the Chunin exams walked in front of the group of genin. The man had shoulder-length hair which hanged around his face and brown eyes. The most noticeable thing was that he wore his forehead protector like a bandana, and he had a senbon in his mouth. His clothing was just the general Jonin uniform. Gunma lazily looked around before nodding to himself. "All genin except for Naruto Uzumaki and Niji Hyuga go to the waiting area," said Gunma, as he watched most of the genin walk off except for Niji. Niji had black hair that was tied up into a loose ponytail, which had reached mid-back. Niji wore a black forehead protector that he wore snugly over his forehead. He wore a khaki shirt, under which he wore a dull blue shirt with mesh armor underneath it, dark brown shorts, and blue shinobi sandals. He also had bandages wrapped around his right arm, chest, and right leg. Niji stood with his arms crossed for a few seconds before smirking. The fool Naruto probably ran or died during the month break. Gunma looked around and couldn't see the blonde boy anywhere, so with a sigh, he went to call Niji the winner. Winner due to disqualification. Niji Gunma was cut off from when a kunai landed in front of his feet, moving his eyes into the direction of where the kunai had come from. He had noticed a lone figure standing on top of the cage box. The figure looked like a Jonin with an Umbu mask. The figure wore the standard Jonin uniform, although without the Chunin flat jacket, as he noticed it hadn't held the Uzumaki emblem on the back. But what Gunma noticed about the Umbu mask was which animal it represented. He knew from some colleagues that no one would even think of wearing that type of mask. It was a fox mask. Soon the figure free fell from the cage box roof and landed in a slight crouch without any sound coming from the impact. Gunma looked at the man for a bit before noticing the blonde hair. Then he grinned. "Are you Naruto Uzumaki?" asked Gunma as he watched as the now-named Naruto tilt his head a bit. "What gave me away?" asked Naruto as he removed his mask and secured it to his hip via belt. Gunma just looked at the kid and smirked. Walking back towards the center of the arena, he stood in between the 2 genin. Raising his hand up, he looked at both sides and then brought his hand down. Both contestants looked at each other, not moving a muscle as a light wind ruffled their hair, even when their fight was started. Naruto looked at Niji with nothing but a blank face as he moved his arms up to his chest and wrapped them up, confusing Niji before he shrugged it off and began to give his opponent some verbal abuse. "You know changing your cloths won't do anything dead last. Fate has chosen me to win this fight. After all, who would support a worthless nobody peasant," said Niji as he smirked, waiting for Naruto's outburst. However, it was only silence before Naruto spoke a few words. "At least I'm not a slave," said Naruto in a whisper that somehow reached everyone's ears, especially Niji's, who had started to see blood. "What did you say, peasant?" muttered Niji as he clenched and unclenched his hands as he formed them into tight fists before releasing them and repeating the process. Naruto looked at him straight in his eyes before saying the words he had not spoken just moments ago. "At least I'm not a slave," said Naruto in a louder voice as he watched Niji tense his legs before sprinting at him, only to fall down to his knees while holding his stomach. Seems his attack worked. Walking up to Niji, he quickly sent some strikes to his shoulders and back before standing back a little and admiring his work. Niji couldn't believe what had happened. He started to run, only to feel his head swim along with his stomach feeling like someone was piercing it with a kunai. Next thing he knew was Naruto stopping his arms from moving along with his legs. Looking up towards Naruto, he gnashed his teeth as he stared into Naruto's eyes. How did you beat me?" asked Niji as medic Neens rushed towards his location ready to pick him up and take him towards the medical booth near the genin stand. Naruto just looked at him for a moment, before turning towards the genin stand, leaving Niji clueless about how he was defeated. Niji just looked at Naruto's back with anger. How dare this peasant do this to him? Trying to get up, Niji then felt all the muscles of his arms rip. "Eh!" screamed Niji as he fell back onto the floor with his head down, showing he was completely knocked out. The crowd was silent as Naruto walked back towards the stand, before Iam stood up from the stand and screamed. "Yes, Naruto-kun, we made over 1,000,000 yen," screamed Iam as she and her father had bet on Naruto winning. And with the odds at 1.5 Niji and 1,000 Naruto, anyone who picked Naruto to win would have quite a bit of cash to spend. Naruto stopped walking and looked towards Iam, and gave a grin and thumbs up before continuing towards the Genin box. Kage booth. The third Hokage stared in shock. His unofficial grandson defeated the Hyuga prodigy in 30 seconds, all without moving his body once until Niji suddenly fell over and was in pain. How did Naruto do that? The Kazekage was in a similar state of wondering. He had not noticed anything before or after the Hyuga fell. The Kazekage turned towards the Hokage with his eyes narrowing. "What did the blonde child do, Hokagedono?" asked the Kazekage with genuine curiosity. The third Hokage just looked at the arena for a bit before shaking his head a bit. "I do not know, Kazekage-dono. I simply do not know," replied the Hokage as he watched Niji Hyuga being carried away towards the medical box. Genin area. As Naruto walked up towards the participants' booth, he saw many look at him in shock, which Naruto understood why, as it was very unlikely that a dead last would beat a prodigy in only 30 seconds. Getting rid of his blank face and replacing it with a grin and wave, he greeted his Friday comrades. Another thing his teachers taught: friends are people who like to be around you for you, and not because they look at you and get an ego boost from your graduation position along with actually hanging out with you for no other reason other than to hang out. Comrades were people you knew better than most, but had not become friends with them. When Naruto looked at it like that, he remembered all the times Kiba, Ino, Sakurak, no just Sakura, and Sasuke had walked up to him, just to give him insults. "Hey everyone, how's it going?" asked Naruto as he walked over towards the balcony and started to lean against it. Now everyone in the participant area was shocked. Naruto Uzumaki didn't scream in greeting and wasn't acting like he was 30 days ago. Shikamaru just looked at Naruto closely with a thoughtful gaze for a bit, before shrugging it off as it being too troublesome to figure out why Naruto was like that. Arena. Gama just shook his head at the very short fight. He did notice something off about the wind, but it was probably just his imagination. "Okay, will the participants Sasuke, Uchiha, and Gaara of the Sand please step forward?" said Genma with a loud voice to get over the talking of the crowd. Only for the crowd to start to cheer very loudly as they waited for Sasuke. 30 seconds later, Genma looked towards the Hokage on what to do as Sasuke did not appear. Kage booth. "Well, it seems that Sasuke inherited Kakashi's lateness. It seems he will be disqualified," muttered the Hokage as he began walking towards the balcony to announce Sasuke's forfeit. However, the Kazekage thought otherwise. "Wait, Hokagedono. Many people turned up to watch Sasuke, Uchiha, and my son Gaara to fight. Maybe you could give them more time?" asked the Kazekage in a polite tone, which the Hokage began to think about. While unfair to other competitors, it would at least give the audience something to wait on. "Fine, I will move his match to the last one before disqualifying him," said the Hokage as he stood at the edge of the balcony. "Civilians and all, Sasuke Uchiha's match and Gaara of the Sand will be moved into the last fight of the first round," said the Hokage, getting cheers of joy from the entire crowd. As he walked back and sat down, he could hear a voice yelling in the distance. Seemed like Naruto did still act like himself. Participant booth. "Damn it, Jiji. Why are you letting that ass have more of a benefit?" screamed Naruto up towards the cage booth while shaking his fist at the area he knew his GG was, only to get everyone on the crowd stare at him. "What? That ass gets everything handed to him. Not my fault, I speak the truth," said Naruto as he crossed his arms and became quiet again. Arena. Genma was smirking, although he would have been laughing if he wasn't the protector of the fight. Naruto sure could make nearly anything laughable. Genma looked towards the Genin booth and called out the two next competitors. "Will Shikamaru Nara and Temari of the Sand please come forth?" said Genma, pointing towards the center only to hear someone surrender. Genin booth. "I surrender," said Shikamaru as he shook his head, muttering troublesome. There was no way he would be able to defeat a wind user without the field being damaged or without the right equipment. Naruto just nodded his head. Shikamaru's clan was strategists, and if it didn't look like he could win, the best choice is to surrender. Although he was going to push Shikamaru in, that would be endangering a comrade, something Naruto would never do. Arena. Genma started to laugh a bit. It seemed like Sasuke's time was running out. Shrugging, Genma called out the next two competitors, only to hear one of them surrenders. Jin and Booth. Yes, I keep changing what the name of the participants both is, sorry. I surrender, said Kankuro, as he couldn't show Crow off until the invasion. Arena. Genma was busting his gut. All the fights were short, and the only one to fight was Naruto and Neji, but Naruto didn't even move until the end of that. Seemed like Sasuke wouldn't get to fight. Kage Booth. The Kazekage was seething. Now there was no choice but to disqualify Sasuke. Damn you, Kakashi, in your lateness, thought the Kazekage as he looked at the Hokage moving towards the balcony. The Hokage was grinning slightly. It seemed that Sasuke was going to be disqualified. Due to Sasuke not appearing, he is now disqualified. Now on to the next match. Naruto Uzumaki versus Gaara of the Sand. However, since the Sasuke and Gaara fight never happened, we will allow a 5-minute break for placing bets, said the Hokage as he walked back towards his chair and sat down with his hands covering his grin. Jin and Booth. Naruto was excited. He was going to fight and actually test his skills against Gaara, unless he falls like Neji did. Haha, this is going to be fun, said Naruto as he started to hop on the balls of his feet in preparation of his entrance, before he stopped jumping and took a breath to calm down. And if like a switch, Naruto's face became blank. As he heard Genma say the 5 minutes is over, he jumped onto the field. Arena. Genma looked at the two ninja as they stared at each other with blank faces and in their ready stances. Genma nodded to himself, ready to step in if Gaara attempts to kill Naruto. Raising his hand up, he looked at both competitors for a bit, before throwing his hand down and jumping away. Fight! Naruto looked at Gaara for a bit, before noticing his attack had hit, but didn't work. That meant that Gaara was either had an immune system that could purge him of nearly anything, or he was a Jinchuriki like he was. Looks like if things get out of hand, he will have to use his gift or seals. Naruto leaned forward slightly before tensing his muscles. Feeding a slight amount of chakra to his body, he dashed. Slam. Naruto stood where Gaara previously stood with his fist in a punching position. Following the direction of his fist, it led to a large hole in the side of the arena. Naruto closed his eyes briefly, searching for Gaara's chakra signature and seeing how it was flowing. It was flowing rapidly. He was angry. Naruto opened his eyes once again and dashed back towards his original starting position. He watched as Gaara moved out of the hole in the wall and stared at him with anger, before smiling maniacally towards Naruto. Yes, you will prove my existence, said Gaara loud enough so that the crowd could hear him. Naruto just stared at the redhead in front of him. He was a Jinchuriki. However, he had to make sure, as there have been bloodlines for nearly every element. Naruto placed his hands behind his back and unsealed 2 kunais with seal markings written on them, which he grabbed one for each hand. Looking at Gaara, he watched as he sent sand tentacles towards him. He could see each movement of the tentacle. However, it was a lot harder than seeing a human body that had 2 arms and legs. Dashing to the left, Naruto jumped over 2 tentacles that were aiming for his stomach. He then jumped on top of a single tentacle and ran along it towards Gaara. Gaara, seeing what he was doing, immediately stopped the sand tentacle before sending all his tentacles right at Naruto, who just jumped on them while gaining a bit closer to Gaara. Naruto, seeing how he was close enough, jumped up towards the sky, blending him in with the sun's shine. Ceiling, 2-point barrier. Throwing the 2 kunai at Gaara's left and right, he watched as the kunai glowed before having a blue barrier appear around him. Gaara tried to move. He tried to fight the barrier, but could only feel himself getting weaker. When Naruto landed, he quickly went through a few hand signs. Ceiling, 5 elemental seal. Screamed Naruto as he charged forward, making sure his barrier ran out of chakra just before he touched it. Naruto watched as his barrier disappeared right when his fingers were a centimeter from it. Seeing how the barrier fell, Naruto pushed his legs a bit harder and rammed his fingers at Gaara's stomach. Even if he didn't hit Gaara's seal, it would knock him out and block him from his buji and chakra. Naruto watched as Gaara looked at him in shock as he flew towards the arena wall once again as Naruto used too much strength when he thrusted his hand onto Gaara's stomach. BOM. The familiar smashing of a wall was heard by all. Ganma, who had decided to check on Gaara's condition slowly, pried the young redhead out of the arena wall. Putting 2 fingers towards his neck to check for a pulse, he was delighted to find Gaara still alive and simply knocked out. The winner is Naruto. Uzuma Gunma was cut off from the sound of the Kage booth exploding along with nearly everyone in the crowd falling asleep, while the sand shinobi started to attack every leaf shinobi there. Throughout the whole fight, Naruto could make out 3 words. We're under attack. Naruto watched as ninjas sprang into action without thinking and started to fight the Suna and the sound ninjas that had mysteriously appeared once the invasion started. Naruto watched as Temari and her brother Kankuro grabbed Gaara and left towards the village's forests. BOM. Looking up, he saw a purplish barrier arise from out of nowhere. Deciding to get a better view, Naruto sprang off the ground and bounced from wall to wall as he reached the purple barrier. A 4-flame formation if he was correct. Naruto looked at the 4 shinobi holding the barrier. The first one he had seen was a rather fat one. He had orange eyes and 3 tufts of orange hair on his head and a mohawk of sorts that ran down the middle and 2 similar styled tufts of hair at the side. He wore a sleeveless tunic with the symbol of the sound 4 on the hem, along with black arm warmers, a pair of black 3/4-length pants that stopped just below his knees. Along with this, he wore sandals with leg warmers, covered by bandages, a purple robe belt around his waist, and a necklace that comprised of circular pieces separating long, metallic pieces. The next person he saw was a girl. The most distinctive feature was her long, untamed, red hair. She also wore a black hat with bandaged sides, and she wore a tan tunic, much like the other members of the sound group, with black shorts and standard black shinobi sandals. They then came to a sight of a man with 6 arms. The man was a light brown-skinned shinobi with black, shaggy hair and black eyes. He wore a black, sleeveless top and shorts, over which he wore a tunic that bore the symbol of a circle and a purple rope belt around his waist. He also wore the forehead protector of his village along with arm warmers, shinobi sandals, and bandages around his legs. The next person Naruto saw was a man with 2 heads, although one of them seemed asleep. The man had straight, dark gray hair with long bangs that covered an eye. From what he could see, the man wore a green shade of lipstick and had dark markings around his eyes, giving him an androgynous appearance. He wore brown tunics with long black wristbands, black skin-tight shorts, and purple ropes tied around his waist. He also wore a dark red, beaded necklace around his neck and a giant scroll behind his back. Naruto turned his attention to what was inside the barrier, and his eyes widened in shock. There was his Jiji fighting Hashirama and Tobirama along with Orochimaru. Naruto had to get in there. He couldn't let his granddad and all but blood fight his senseis. Naruto dashed towards the barrier, ignoring the redhead woman commenting on him being dumb and an idiot. Naruto went through hand signs. Ceiling, temporal distortion. When Naruto placed his glowing yellow hand on the barrier, he watched as the barrier opened itself up so that it would fit his body, along with someone slightly taller than him. Dashing through the barrier, he ignored the swearing of the redhead girl along with gaping ninjas who had looked to see what he had done. Naruto watched as he moved towards the battle, his Jiji fighting off his senseis. Naruto looked towards Hashirama as he was preparing his chakra for a Mokutan attack. He had to act quickly. Pumping chakra into his body, Naruto dashed straight towards his sensei before a blue fire lit up in his hand. Ceiling, restriction of the Shinigami. Naruto thrusted his hand into Hashirama's armor as he barreled through the corpse, cutting it in 2 and sending bits of tiny paper like cells into the air. As Hashirama's body dropped, he quickly sent Naruto a grin before falling face first into the ground, which wasn't a great view for a fight. Naruto landed on a branch that his sensei created with would release secret technique. Nativity of a world of trees, which allows the user to summon trees anywhere. This included but not limited to roofs, ocean, walls, metal, and many other objects. Naruto snapped his head to the side as he felt a punch to his jaw, sending him through multiple trees and branches. landing with half his body encased by a tree's base. He looked up to where he was previously standing and had come across Tobirama, his sensei. Forcing himself up, Naruto moved to stand on a single branch before creating 10 cage bushins. Naruto looked towards his clones before pointing towards the direction his Gigi was. "Help Gigi, okay? From what I heard, Orochimaru is a sneaky bastard that can get himself out of nearly anything, got it," said Naruto as he turned back to his sensei, who was simply watching him with a smile. The clones nodded before dashing towards the Hokage's position. Naruto stared at his sensei with a blank face as his eyes traveled to his surrounding area, preparing to fight his sensei. Tobirama looked at Naruto with a grin. While he couldn't control his body, he could still talk and show emotions. "Naruto, I know that Mai and Hashirama's scrolls, along with Minato's, had been destroyed due to the time seal placed on it. But even though it's only been 10 days since you and my clone had trained, I can tell that you are doing very well. However, you didn't notice me place a genjutsu on you. So I'm sorry, but you are now dead," said Tobirama with his face marrying a frown as he watched Naruto grab his head and fell to the ground with blood pooling out of his head through his ears and closed eyes. "And you don't know when it was a Kage Bushin in my place," replied Naruto with his hand now shoved through Tobirama's back along with his other hand placing the sealing restriction of the Shinigami on him. Ripping his hand out from Tobirama's back, he watched as Tobirama fell forward onto the roof tiles that the large amount of trees didn't cover. Naruto looked at his sensei's down form and gave a small smile, before dashing off to his Gigi's battle as he felt 6 of the 9 he had sent to help his Gigi, as he had used one to trick Tobirama, although it was probably Tobirama making his body not react to him switching with a clone. "He'll be seeing you, sensei," muttered Naruto as he left the clearing, not noticing the smile Tobirama had held on his face. Orochimaru and Hiruzen battle. The third Hokage was huffing. He was keeping even with his student Orochimaru. However, his aging body will eventually fail him. Hiruzen dodged the incoming snake barrage that Orochimaru sent towards him. He watched as a Naruto clone kicked a stray snake away from him before being dispelled by Orochimaru, who had jumped towards him and sent a neck-snapping kick. Even though Hiruzen knew that it was only a clone of Naruto, seeing his unofficial grandson's neck snap towards you would slightly scare you. Hiruzen quickly spun his adamantine staff in a 360-degree spin, knocking all the other snakes Orochimaru had sent towards him after once again killing another Naruto clone, this time with his Kusanagi blade. Orochimaru grinned as he sliced through the few Naruto clones that had appeared to help Hiruzen. But he did note that the Kage Bushins did not disappear after he sent Tobirama to kill Naruto. Did Naruto take to hiding? Well, it shouldn't take much longer for Tobirama to kill him. Orochimaru chuckled as he pointed his katana, the Kusanagi blade, at his sensei, manga version of sword. The Kusanagi blade had a standard katana shape. It had black cloth surrounding the handle with white diamonds running along the sides of it. The guard was just a plain gold circle. The actual blade of the Kusanagi was black with a white edge running along the bottom of the blade. "Hiruzen, time to die," said Orochimaru as he dashed towards his sensei with his sword forward, only to get a snapping kick to the back of his head, which sent him flying towards the barrier, only to be saved by one of his snakes he had summoned mid-fight. Orochimaru looked to who had attacked him and looked shocked. There stood Naruto Uzumaki, his green jacket ripped beyond repair along with his black long sleeve having multiple tears running throughout it. "Sorry, Orochimaru, but I won't let you kill the Hokage," said Naruto as he started to build up chakra within his coils. "As a shinobi of Konoha, it's my duty to protect the great will of fire. I learnt that from my senseis, and I will be damned if I let their teachings be wasted upon me," said Naruto as he activated his technique. "Flash step!" shouted Naruto as he disappeared from everyone's sight. Soon Orochimaru felt a blinding pain in his ribs as he was sent flying from one end of the purple flames formation to the other. However, this time, he actually hit the barrier. "Ah!" screamed Orochimaru as he bounced off of the barrier, showing his now burnt left arm, which had begun to bleed as Orochimaru's arm peeled. Orochimaru looked for Naruto, only to see him on the ground holding his stomach, along with his sensei guarding him. Hiruzen moved as soon as he saw Naruto fall to his knees and grab his stomach. "Naruto, my boy, are you okay?" asked Hiruzen as he kept his eyes on Orochimaru, who had started to look towards them. Naruto huffed, and he tried to draw chakra out of Hashirama's trees. He knew that his technique, which was just an upgraded Shunshin, had not been tested in the field, but he didn't think that the effects would be this bad. He hadn't taken into the account of the uneven flooring, which had forced him to change directions several times within his single flash step. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just going to have to gather some chakra." "You wouldn't have a chakra pill on you?" asked Naruto as he watched his Gigi drop a single pill onto a tile in front of him. Nodding gratefully towards his Gigi, he swallowed the pill and instantly felt his chakra start to return. He was definitely going to get put into the hospital for chakra exhaustion. Standing up, Naruto quickly flared his chakra to start healing his minor wounds at a faster rate, as he already had Kyuubi's chakra healing him. Naruto looked towards Orochimaru, noticing something that he didn't notice before while he was gathering some chakra. The Kusanagi wasn't in Orochimaru's hand. Naruto heard a swish behind him and widened his eyes. The Kusanagi blade was flying towards his Gigi. Naruto jumped forward and pushed him out of the way, surprising the Hokage as he watched Naruto get the Kusanagi pulled through him. Hiruzen watched as Naruto passed out from the pain of having a sword go through his left shoulder. Orochimaru grew even more pissed. He was aiming for his sensei, but the brat had pushed him out of the way and instead gotten himself stabbed. Orochimaru watched as Hiruzen suddenly started to cough blood out from his mouth. It seemed the Kusanagi blade's poison was finally taking its effect. Hiruzen covered his mouth with a hand as he coughed out blood, which some of it landed on Naruto's face. He was going to die without medical treatment, and if he died, Orochimaru could kill Naruto afterwards. He knew what he was going to do. Looking towards his student, Hiruzen hardened his eyes as he started to go through a chain of hand signs. Looking fiercely towards Orochimaru's eyes, Hiruzen had flashbacks of how his student started and how he had ended, and could only become more determined as he watched through all of the innocent people being used as guinea pigs by him. "Orochimaru, too long have I let you live. As my final act of Hokage, I will kill you by taking you to hell with me," shouted Hiruzen towards the end of his speech as he finished his hand signs. Orochimaru, who had noticed what jutsu used those hand signs, widened his eyes in fear. Throwing the Kusanagi blade towards Hiruzen before he completed the jutsu, he watched as Gunma had deflected the katana before dispersing due to limited chakra. "Dead demon consuming seal," shouted Hiruzen as the specter of the Shinigami started to appear, before getting feeling someone swapping places with him using the replacement technique. Hiruzen looked towards the Shinigami he had summoned and widened his eyes when he saw the specter's hand being placed through Naruto's stomach. The Shinigami was a translucent giant specter with a demonic visage. It was much larger than an average human, possessing long, shaggy white hair, from which two red horns protrude, and dark grayish-blue-colored skin. It is draped in large white garments and carries a set of prayer beads. The Shinigami also had a tanto in its mouth. The Shinigami stared at Naruto with squinted eyes. "Why have you summoned me, human?" asked the Shinigami as he looked towards the blonde child in front of him. He did look familiar, though. Naruto looked ahead as he stared into Orochimaru's eyes. "I want to seal Orochimaru into you," said Naruto as he watched the figure look towards Orochimaru and squint a bit harder before opening his eyes back to normal. "Ah yes, the one who avoids me by transferring Bodis," muttered the Shinigami. Naruto quickly formed his hands into a certain hand sign, which made the remaining Naruto clones paralyses Orochimaru with multiple seals that he made the clones prepare during his and Hiruzen battle against Orochimaru. Naruto looked towards the Shinigami before nodding. He watched as the Shinigami's ghostly hand shot through him and straight at Orochimaru as he was attempting to move only to fail. As the ghostly hand grabbed Orochimaru and started to pull his spirit out, Orochimaru decided to become a bastard. "I will not die here," screamed Orochimaru as he made his discarded Kusanagi blade once again sail towards Naruto, who had only widened his eyes before feeling the blade punch right through his right lung. Naruto coughed out blood from his mouth as his lungs started to fill with blood. Naruto tried to focus on Orochimaru as he used his chakra to pull his being out from him using the Shinigami's hand. However, he couldn't even see Orochimaru now. All he could see was a white blur ahead of him with a blue blur connecting him and the white being, which he knew was Orochimaru. "Come on, Naruto. You can do this," shouted Naruto to himself as he forced his chakra to pull whatever he had latched onto, only to feel his control slip, and instead of pulling out Orochimaru's head, chest, and arms, he only managed to pull the arms off him. As the Shinigami went to cut Naruto's soul in half as he did, he felt something off, before grinning a bit before disappearing, while leaving Naruto's soul intact, although nobody knew that as Naruto just simply fell towards the ground. Orochimaru was livid when he tried to surge chakra to his body. He hadn't felt his arms. All he felt was an unholy pain where his arms were. He then realized what had happened. He lost his ability to use chakra in his arms. He lost his arms. He lost the one thing that mattered to him, his jutsus. Orochimaru was about to have Naruto's head before he felt a chakra surge coming a few feet from him. Turning his head, he was shocked to see what he did. He saw his sensei with nothing but a pure blank expression, although he now had brown pigments going across from his forehead and down the middle of his nose. Hiruzen just looked at Orochimaru's arms as they slowly start to turn purple. Hiruzen slowly turned his eyes towards Orochimaru, who had instantly called the shinobi holding the barrier to help him escape. However, he didn't see Hiruzen smash his face into the ground. Hiruzen looked at his student with nothing for a few moments, before a raging hatred appeared across his features. "I was weak, Orochimaru. I was weak for letting you live because you were my favorite student. I had turned a blind eye at your experiments, and look what it had cost me later down the road. It cost me my village's people, my likely family, and my unofficial grandson," screamed Hiruzen as he stomped on Orochimaru's back. Hearing a crunch from his ex-student's back, he continued to snap his spine with multiple stomps, before he started to feel the effects from the Kusanagi again. Orochimaru quickly went through some hand signs, ignoring his excruciating pain as it only grew with each second. Finishing his hand signs, he watched as his sound for dropped the barrier around him and Hiruzen before teleporting to him with a shunshin and quickly reverse summoning him and then back to his village. The Umbu stationed around the field instantly tried to give chase to Orochimaru and his ninjas before seeing them disappear. Refocusing on their efforts, they quickly grabbed the Hokage by the arms, only to hear him speak. "Grab Naruto Uzumaki's body, if he is somehow still alive. Bring him to the Umbu hospital," said the Hokage as he stared towards Naruto's unmoving body for a few seconds before being shunned towards his personal hospital room that had the best medics in the village working there. One of the few Umbu there walked towards Naruto's still body before placing a hand on his chest trying to see if he was indeed dead. "Dubump, dubump, dubump." The Umbu reared his hand back in shock. Naruto Uzumaki was still alive. The Umbu quickly looked towards two colleges of his. "Bird, snake. Pick up Naruto Uzumaki and take him towards the Umbu hospital. He is in critical danger right now, his heartbeat very weak, but still there," said the tiger Umbu as he pointed towards Naruto's prone body, only to hear someone within the group mutter out how they shouldn't save the demon and just let him die. Tiger turned to the operative and stared at him for a few seconds, before smashing a knee into his gut and knocking him out. Tiger turned back towards the group of Umbu. "Go!" screamed Tiger as he watched them start to move. In the arena? In the middle of the arena, there was a puff of smoke. "Yo, are we on it?" Kakashi stopped as he noticed that no one was there. Blinking to himself, he must have went a day early or something. Turning towards Sasuke with an eye smile, he pointed his thumbs up. "Well, Sasuke, looks like we have more time to train." With that, Kakashi grabbed Sasuke by the shoulder before shining back towards his secret training ground. "Hospital. Where am I?" thought Naruto as he slowly opened his eyes and instantly covered them due to the brightness. Allowing his eyes to adjust to the brightness within the room, he slowly sat up and looked around, only to come to the conclusion that he was in the general hospital again. When Naruto tried to stand up, he felt a shock run through his system and a massive pain in his shoulder. Looking down towards his right shoulder, Naruto just stared blankly at the wrappings around his entire chest and stomach. Thinking back to his injuries, he remembered himself taking the Kusanagi through both the stomach and the right lung while helping his Gigi in battle. His Gigi. He passed out before he could help, although he felt something was different within him. Grabbing the edge of his bed, Naruto started to push himself onto his 2 feet. Letting go of the bed, he started to slowly walk towards his hospital room door. Reaching out with his right hand, he grabbed the door knob before slowly twisting it open as his wrist was sore for some odd reason. Sticking his head out, Naruto looked both directions before slowly walking out of his room. When he was younger, if he was caught sneaking out of the hospital, he would have many ninjas throw him back in there under Hokage's orders. It sucked because it was boring in the hospital. Walking down the long walkway, Naruto took a second to look out of the nearby window and watched Konoha shinning with just a bit of rubble here and there, although the gates around Konoha was pretty damaged. Turning his head back towards the walkway, he used the wall next to him to support him as he walked through the hallway. Closing his eyes for a moment, Naruto started to sense chakra signatures spread all around the village. Locking onto the largest chakra signature, he opened his eyes and started to walk forward only to see a ninja appear in front of him with a shunshin. The ninja was obviously a woman as her body was amazingly shaped. The most distinguishing feature of the Umbu woman was her long purple hair. The Umbu with a Nico mask looked at Naruto for a bit, before placing a hand on his shoulder and shuns behind him towards the Hokage tower. Hokage office. Hiruzen watched as a poof of smoke and leaves appeared in the middle of his office. Once the leaves and smoke cleared, there stood Naruto Uzumaki and Umbu Nico. Hiruzen looked towards Naruto's state of dress, which was just the regular hospital gown that was administered to all patients. He chuckled to himself that Naruto hadn't noticed his dress yet. What the hell? Screamed Naruto as he looked down at himself to see a hospital gown on him. The Umbu Nico's shoulders were moving slightly up and down, giving off that she was laughing slightly. Hiruzen grinned before nodding towards Nico, giving her the order to go back into position. With a replying nod, she jumped into one of the darkened corners and disappeared. While she just sat there. Hiruzen stood up while holding his right hip slightly as he walked towards Naruto. When he reached Naruto, he wrapped him up in a hug, which Naruto returned. When the hug stopped, Hiruzen clicked his fingers and a replica of Naruto's new cloths appeared, along with his old jumpsuits. Hiruzen looked towards all the ceilings and nodded, making the 4 Umbu there appear. He then looked back towards Naruto and smiled. Your choice, he said as he went to wait outside the office. Naruto got what he meant. He could become a ninja or be like he used to be, a clown. It wasn't that hard of a choice. Naruto walked towards his carefully folded replica of his cloths from the Chunin exams final. Quickly putting his black long-sleeve shirt and baggy pants, he looked for the jacket but noticed it wasn't there, along with his fox mask. Walking outside, he saw his Gigi smile a proud smile at him and also got 4 nods from the Umbu at his choice. Naruto nodded back towards the Umbu and looked at his Gigi seriously. Where's my jacket and fox mask? Asked Naruto as he watched the Hokage raise his eyebrow at him for that question, as he wasn't expecting Naruto to ask about his fox mask. Hiruzen looked towards one of the Umbu and made a few hand signs behind his back. With a nod from the Umbu, he quickly disappeared to do what his Hokage had told him. Looking back at Naruto, Hiruzen grinned. I don't know Naruto, but would you like to come with me to the council room? Asked the Hokage. Getting a shrug from Naruto, they both began to walk towards the council room, with the Hokage noticing Naruto's slow but easier walk. It seemed that Naruto was healing while walking. As Hiruzen and Naruto were walking, the Hokage turned towards Naruto with a small smile. So, how was training with 3 Kage? Asked Hiruzen casually as he saw Naruto widen his eyes to maximum proportion and quickly turn his head towards his Gigi. How? Asked Naruto as he noticed that his Gigi wasn't angry at all, even though he kinda took some things. I saw through the crystal ball of your training at times. Good job, by the way. Maybe in a few years you could actually gain the title of Hokage, said Hiruzen as he and Naruto walked towards the council room. Naruto looked towards Hiruzen before shagging his now not painfully bad shoulders and upper body. So you know that I stole my parents' scrolls along with going through the forbidden scroll again, right? Said Naruto as he kept looking forward, not noticing his Gigi widen his eyes similar to how Naruto had a few moments ago. Hiruzen was gaping. He thought that Naruto only managed to accidentally get the three Kages to help him, and that was a shock. He thought that only Minato's scroll would appear if Naruto swiped blood onto the pictures. And now he finds out that Naruto had taken his parents' scrolls and looked through the forbidden scroll again. How did he do that? Finally reaching the council room, Naruto and Hiruzen walked through the door going to the Hokage podium. Hiruzen looked at Naruto for a bit, deciding if he should do what he was going to do. Finally deciding, he looked towards Naruto and grinned. "Naruto, sit at the Uzumaki clan seat," said Hiruzen, making all the council members look at him in shock. Naruto looked to the seat that was in between the Nara clan head and the Hyuga clan head. Walking towards the seat, he sat himself down, ignoring the mutterings around him, although he made the seat a little bigger using his Mokuton so that he would be able to properly see. Hiruzen nodded towards Naruto, who in turn gave him a thumb up. Hiruzen looked towards the room and started. "We are here today to discuss promotions for a few genin who had gone above and beyond what was expected of them. So the names are Shikamaru Nara, Shino Aburame, and Naruto Uzumaki," said Hiruzen as he tried to start the voting. He was interrupted by a civilian council member. "What about Uchiha-sama and my daughter? They deserves the promotion," screamed a banshee or a woman with pink hair and green eyes, similar to Sakura Haruno. Naruto was holding his ears as well as most of the other shinobi, although Naruto and Tsum had the worst of it as their heightened senses picked up on the sound. Hiruzen's eyes started to twitch before sighing. "And why should I promote Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno?" asked Hiruzen, only to regret asking as the woman opened her mouth once again. "Because Sasuke is an Uchiha, and we need him and the Sharingan back. And my daughter because she defeated a clan child," shouted the copy of Sakura as she slammed her fist down onto the table. Just before Hiruzen could reply, Naruto moved his hand up. "Could I place a volume control seal on her? My ears are bleeding along with hers," said Naruto as he tilted his head to the left and spilt some blood onto the Hyuga head, which in turn looked at him in hate. Hiruzen looked towards Tsum and indeed saw that Tsum, the Inuzuka clan head, was indeed bleeding out of her ears from Hikari's voice. Nodding, he saw Naruto disappear and slap a seal on the back of Hikari and then reappear back in his seat. "What did you do to me, demon?" said Hikari as she attempted to scream, only to find that she couldn't. At that moment, everyone in the council started to worship Naruto without him knowing, before getting over it. Hiruzen then answered Hikari's previous question. Sasuke doesn't deserve the position as he hadn't even turned up for the Chunin exams and Sakura had drew against a clan child. But that also wouldn't have given her the position of Chunin as Chunin need tact, skill, and leadership, said Hiruzen. "Okay, now Shikamaru Nara." All four. 3/4 of the council risen their hands as they had heard he managed to lead a small group of genin to help minimize damage around the academy and prevented the fall of a medical team who were passing by under attack. "Next on the agenda in Shino Aburame," said Hiruzen as he watched 1/4 of the council put their hands up. It was known that Shino also helped with Shikamaru, just not as much, although most of the medical team did continue living due to a very smart bug clone squad, which was made out to be the medical team. Hiruzen then nodded towards Naruto. "And finally Naruto Uzumaki," said Hiruzen as he watched both the shinobi and civilian side of the council didn't raise their hand at all. Naruto looked at them with a little bit of wonder before shrugging. There was always field promotion or other methods. Hiruzen raised his eyebrow at everyone keeping their hands down for Naruto's promotion, wondering why. He voiced his concern. "And why shouldn't Naruto get promoted?" asked Hiruzen as he watched the Hyuga head stand up. From what all his previous record, he was nothing but a prankster and the dead last of his generation. Now, while I had indeed seen his Chunin exams fights, they were obviously staged as not even I could defeat Niji that fast. Hiruzen tilted his head before looking towards Shikaka Nara. The man stood up and gave a sigh. Naruto Uzumaki's personality and characteristics don't show a competent leader at all, and he does not show any ounce of tactics, which could get his team killed, said Shikaku. Hiruzen started to think about how Naruto not only saved them, but indirectly take out their opponent's Jinchuriki and saved him from dying at the hands of his senseis and student. Naruto sighed. Looks like his personality that Tobirama had pointed out was definitely going to haunt him later on in life. Stupid sensei knowing everything. Hiruzen then looked towards his ceiling and nodded. He watched as a figure landed straight into the middle of the room. Umbu Tiger, should Naruto Uzumaki gain the promotion of Chunin? Asked Hiruzen as he watched Tiger get ready to talk. Yes, he should. He not only battled and defeated 2 opponents with ease, he also breached a flame formation barrier, which should have burnt anyone to a crisp at contact. And he then helped the Hokage battle weakened versions of Hashirama-sama and Tobirama-sama. Then helped Sandaime-sama with Orochimaru, and even took 2 sword stabs from Orochimaru to help Sandaime-sama. Personally, I would just have him join Umbu, said Tiger, as he felt his Umbu Commander Dragon shake his head in agreement. Gasps were heard throughout the council room. Naruto Uzumaki as an Umbu? What's next the Sandaime actually accepting? The Sandaime actually thought about it for a moment, before calling the Umbu Commander out. Dragon, come out and state whether or not should Naruto Uzumaki join the Umbu Corps, said Hiruzen as he watched his Umbu Commander appear within a moment's notice. The Dragon Umbu was silent for a few moments before speaking. I think that Naruto Uzumaki should be implemented into Umbu. His skills are quite high compared to how he was 31 days ago, which brings me to wonder what he did. However, I recommend he join Umbu, said the dragon masked man as he then looked towards his Hokage. Naruto was just absorbing it all in. He might get recommended for Umbu. He might be given training for the best of the best. Hiruzen started to think. Umbu wasn't the best for a child, but he knew Naruto would pull through. However, there was the thing about Naruto now being the center of attention after the whole Chunin exams. Maybe, yeah, that could work. As he was about to speak, the Hyuga head Hayashi stood up and slammed his hands down onto the table. This is ludicrous, shouted Hayashi as he looked towards his right, looking straight at Naruto with his Byakugan active. Aren't you taking his personality and mission reports in? He was a problem in everything, and his skills against the 2 previous Kage and Orochimaru? Preposterous. It would be impossible for someone of his caliber to be that good, said Hayashi as he sat back down, ignoring the Hokage sending him a slight glare. Turning back to Naruto, he grinned. From now on I promote Naruto Uzumaki with Special Umbu, said the Sandaime Hokage as he stared into his council. Have you finally lost the plot? Gigi, there's no such thing, asked Naruto as he stared at his Gigi with a tilt of his head as he saw his Gigi start to twitch his eye. The Sandaime watched as some of his council started to talk about him behind their hands. The sad part, it was the shinobi who were doing it. Sighing to himself, he started to explain. I had thought of the idea just now, Naruto. So no, I am not losing the plot as you said. Special Umbu is a rank that would give you both regular shinobi benefits and some Umbu benefits. The benefits would be higher access to missions, better pay, and higher entrance to the shinobi library along with being able to train in Umbu facilities. Your duties, however, will be split between being a regular shinobi and part-time Umbu, understand? Asked Hiruzen as he watched Naruto's face go through several different emotions. The first was shock, then joy, then excitement, then realization, then slight sadness, before it morphed into acceptance, before turning to confusion again. There's a shinobi library? Asked Naruto. Only make the clan heads mentally agree with themselves that Naruto wasn't fit to become a higher rank than Genin. The Hokage nodded with a slight grin. The shinobi library never gained much attention or people, due to it being a library, and so the only ones who really went there were Jonin, who were stuck on something, and Chunins who wanted to know some things about the previous Jonin exams. Naruto nodded, remembering to check the library out, before staring back at the Hokage with his shining eyes that were brimming with determination. I accept, and I swear as Naruto Uzumaki. As a ninja of Konoha, I will not let anything happen while it is under my watch, said Naruto as he placed a closed fist onto his chest, right where his heart was. Hiruzen nodded before closing the meeting. Naruto's apartment. So bored now. Maybe a game of shogi would do. Now when I versus a clone it doesn't work out as it always ends with a draw as they were the same person. Maybe some more Fuinjutsu practice. Yeah, that sounded good, thought Naruto as he opened his fridge and grabbed a sack of mixed barriers that he had found in the forest. Shutting his fridge door and walking towards his living room with a mouth full of mixed barriers. Naruto went towards a small table cupboard and opened the third drawer, which was the lowest one, and pulled out a scroll labeled Fuinjutsu Studies, Advanced Volume 110. The book was all about how to start planning your own Fuinjutsu. Currently, Naruto was only on the first chapter. Although most people would call Naruto a Fuinjutsu master after seeing how he was able to use Fuinjutsu to 1. Beat Gaara and 2. Break through a flame barrier, he was only a beginner who had finished the beginner book and used his created chakra density jutsu to make seals appear anywhere he wanted. Naruto sent some chakra into the scroll and watched as the first volume of the book appeared. Holding the book in his hands, Naruto created 5 Kage Bushins. Poof! Sir, said the Kage Bushins loudly as they each held their book in a salute. Naruto just had a small sweat drop down the side of his head. They sometimes were too much like his old self. How did anyone put up with him? Okay, so you are all going to read Volume 1 while I go and start doing some training. Maybe I might even check the library. So remember to spell when you are able to memorize the entire book. I can still only do this with 5 clones, but I'm sure I will be able to finish the other volumes in a week or 2. So get cracking, said Naruto as he walked towards his front door and opened it just enough for him to walk through. Shutting the door behind him, he looked down to see a box along with some sort of map. Placing the map aside, he opened the box and came to a sight. His fox mask, exactly colored like his old one, white base with red markings and a black nose. Under his fox mask, there was his Umbu uniform along with his Chunin jacket. Slipping on his Chunin jacket, he picked up the map before jumping to the roof right across from him. Looking down towards the map, he saw that the map led towards an abandoned sector of the village, which hadn't recovered from Kyuubi's attack, which luckily was at the edge of the village, so no one really needed to go there. Reading the map more carefully, he noticed a few words at the bottom of the scroll. Don't get caught. Don't get caught. Umbu, that must be it. The letter was probably directions to Umbu HQ, but they might have changed it so that it was a recruitment test. Naruto looked towards the abandoned sector and grinned. Well, Umbu. Game on, said Naruto before jumping towards the abandoned section of the village. Council room. What? Shouted Kakashi as he looked at the Hokage and the council. He had just found out that he had missed an invasion and that Naruto would no longer be a part of Team 7 due to getting a special promotion. Kakashi was in shock right now. He thought that the Chunin exams would go for at least 3 hours, but apparently Naruto had defeated Neji so quick and everyone else had simply surrendered. But what about Sasuke? You all know that he would have won his match, said Kakashi, trying to have his most successful student turn into a Chunin so that he could have Sasuke as an apprentice, as he thought Naruto's promotion was just something the Hokage told Naruto to keep him happy. Hiruzen looked at Kakashi with a disappointed stare. Here he was trying to get Sasuke promoted and was ignoring Naruto and his other student. Kakashi, get out, end of discussion. Sasuke Uchiha will not get promoted. This council meeting is dismissed. Secret training area? Flash step. Throughout the clearing, there were multiple flashes of gold before it finally stopped in the middle of the clearing. Huff, huff, huff. Okay, so making chakra into a physical form is taxing, while the actual travel isn't all that much. Maybe I could make a seal that condenses air molecules so that I don't have to huff, huff, summon chakra into a dense physical layer under my feet each time while in the air, muttered Naruto to himself as he was trying to finish his flash step and make it more reliable instead of just a few steps. Lying on the ground, Naruto opened his Chunin vest and grabbed the Umbu HQ map and looked at it. It was simple and straight to the point. Get to the objective without being caught, and he had a time limit of 5 days. How did he miss the time limit? Naruto moved the scroll onto the grass beside him as he looked towards the clear blue sky, letting all his chakra flow through him. Shutting his eyes, Naruto focused on the life around him, feeling each and every living thing within the forest and river. Suddenly, Naruto felt something else along the creatures around him. It felt pure like nature itself. The energy was floating all around him and even under him. Drawing the energy, he felt peace overcome his senses before snapping out of it when he opened his eyes to see a small fox jump on his stomach. Scratching the little fella behind the ears, he watched as it yipped at him before running off towards the forest. Naruto then thought back to the feeling he felt, the peace he felt when he absorbed some of the energy. Was that what peace would feel like? Would everyone have a chance to feel like that sometime in their life? Could that feeling be shared by everyone? Naruto held on to the feeling he had felt for a few moments before standing up and grabbing his scroll. If peace truly felt like that, then everyone should be able to feel it, thought Naruto, as he started to walk towards the abandoned section of Konoha. An hour later, we find Naruto standing just before the abandoned area. Naruto closed his eyes as he felt chakra signatures in front of him by a few meters. Naruto moved his chakra around for a bit before releasing a breath and opening his eyes. Then he disappeared, shocking the hidden Anbu as they saw nothing but a flash before he disappeared. When Naruto reappeared, he had landed on top of a small building. Moving his hand towards the wall to his right, he started to send chakra pulses through the stone wall. He could have used his sensory abilities, but it required him to focus and remain still as it is not trained enough. Sure, he could use it to sense a mile radius, but he hadn't had any training that lets him use it subconsciously and on the run. Feeling through the wall to Anbu, who had seemed to shuffle slightly when he sent the chakra pulse. He knew that they could instantly teleport to the HQ and report that he was here since the test had started when he entered. Naruto came to one conclusion: to knock them out. Now Naruto wasn't stupid anymore. He knew that if he fought two Anbu head-on, he would be killed or defeated almost instantly. So Naruto decided to use a new technique he had created called phase, which, like the title of the name, allows him to phase through any solid object. However, this would alert any sensor Anbu within the area if he took too long. However, due to his chakra blanketing a good 50 or so meters, it would take them a while to find him. Naruto started to send chakra through his body, and then started to make his chakra move faster and faster within himself. Reaching an extremely high chakra velocity, Naruto made all that chakra come to the surface. If people saw Naruto now, they would only see his general shape as his body was vibrating at an astonishing rate. Naruto walked towards the wall before simply passing through. The way this technique works is vibrating himself so that he could go through any surface as long as he was vibrating at his current rate. Tobirama had said that it was due to the phenomenon called quantum tunneling. A side effect from vibrating his body fast was the fact that he could also move at an insane speed, although that depleted his chakra at a very fast rate. The most he could run with the speed he gains from the technique was 5 seconds, although he managed to travel from Konoha to all the other major villages. But when he had returned, he passed out for a few days. Naruto looked at the two Anbu, who had not noticed him behind them, as he was now pure kinetic energy for the next few seconds as he stopped pumping chakra into himself to keep his vibration. Moving his hands, he sent the two Anbu into the ground as he hit every pressure point and paralyzing point in their backs, although they should be up in a few minutes. Naruto looked at his body as it stopped vibrating at an insane rate. Forcing chakra around his body, he started to calm his raging heart. Another side effect from the vibrations, he could gain a heart attack at any moment while vibrating at that speed. However, he would have been dead if not for Kyuubi's chakra strengthening his heart when he was younger, along with keeping it from exploding. This goes the same for any organ or limb he had. Puffing out some air, Naruto leaned against the wall to his left and sent another chakra pulse that ran throughout the entire abandoned part of Konoha. Ping! He felt something within a hidden building a few feet under the current house he occupied currently. Naruto looked at himself for a second, before once again forcing his chakra into vibrating at an insane rate. He felt his reserves plummet rapidly as he stopped and pushed his chakra through his body. Naruto knew that if he kept going at this vibration speed, he will pass out. Naruto forced his feet to start to penetrate the ground below him, and as if like magic, he started to phase through the ground. Naruto watched as he went through a few floors and finally land on a metallic platform. Closing his eyes and spreading his senses, he quickly noted that there was a single signature right in front of him. Opening his eyes, he widened them in shock when he came face to face with a yellow gas cloud. Thud. Naruto's body fell down hard against the metallic floor. The man in front of Naruto's body was none other than Dragon, the Umbu commander. Dragon stared at Naruto's prone body for a few seconds before clicking his fingers, summoning two Umbu. Nico and Tiger appeared and saluted. "Sir," said both Umbu as they looked towards their commander. Dragon looked at them for a moment before staring back at Naruto's prone body. "How did he do?" asked the commander as he looked towards his two Umbu with a tilt of his head. Nico stepped forward. "He did very well, for a likely recruit. He had only set off 2 out of the original 200 silent alarms and only alerted the 2 Umbu who were knocked out. So overall he did this almost perfectly," replied Nico as she looked towards Naruto's still prone body, with some thoughts running through her head. The commander nodded before walking away. "Bring him to his next test," said Dragon, before walking away towards his office. Nico and Tiger nodded to each other before grabbing Naruto's body and sunshining to Naruto's next test. Thud, 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 slink, slink, thud. The screams could be heard from room to room. The one who was screaming was someone subjected to the worst torture subjected to anyone. Umbu interrogation chamber. "Ha, ha, ha. Is that the best you got?" asked Naruto as he had his hands tied behind a chair, along with his feet. He had multiple chakra-suppressing seals placed on his as well. Looking at his appearance, you could see the rips that littered his cloths and skin. His long-sleeve black shirt had large amounts of cuts running along it, while his Chunin jacket was more of a rag. His headband had sticked firmly on his head, not even a slight cut on it. But that was due to Naruto trying to avoid anything that came near it. It was a gift after all. And finally his pants. They were about to fall off from him. The Umbu was vicious. Naruto was staring at the Umbu woman in front of him. The only thing he could deduce was that she had long black hair that reached her mid-back, and that she wore a blank Umbu mask along with her skin being an Uchiha pale color. She had been interrogating him for the past 6 hours. He would have cracked if he couldn't escape the pain and shackles, although he noticed that when he healed from one set of attacks, the next ones were that much weaker each time, until he could barely feel the hits delivered by the woman in front of him. The woman could only stare in shock behind her mask. She had done every torture technique that Umbu were taught, some of which could kill the victim. For example, there was one where the Umbu places a liquid on a torture weapon, and when it hits it makes that part of the body weakened and sensitive to any strike that a fist could easily go through their entire chest and kill them, either by having a fist through their body or due to a heart attack because of all the pain the person would receive. The Umbu looked down towards Naruto's now shorts and grinned. She knew how to break him. Walking around the table with her right hand slightly scraping the table that had separated them, she placed her right hand on Naruto's inner thigh, bringing him to a shiver. The Umbu leaned forward toward his ear and started to talk. "Oh, Naruto-kun, we don't need to keep torturing you. So if you tell me where the Hokage's forbidden scroll is, I will give you a reward," said the Umbu saucily as she started to rub her hand around Naruto's package until she felt it touching her hand. The Umbu looked towards Naruto's now fallen pants and saw a sight of Naruto's package standing at full attention. The Umbu woman looked at the package for a bit before a stray thought went into her as she looked at Naruto's 8-inch penis. "I could just have him tell me mid-sex," thought the Umbu, before wrapping her right hand around it and started to stroke it. The Umbu leaned back towards Naruto's ear as he was shutting his eyes and being silent. "Or you could tell me while we are together," said the Umbu as she went to her knees and used her left hand to take away her mask and show a woman at around the age of 2,325 with black eyes, matching her long black hair. She also had small cute lips which were rose red with lipstick, which at this moment were stretched into a small grin as she moved her face close to his package. Lemon all kids who don't know what sex is or have seen it look away and come back when there is another black line like this again. Also to any girls woman reading this, don't hate me, it's a Umbu recruitment thing. And in a world of ninjas where the expected living age is around 3,050 max, you don't hate. The woman looked at Naruto as she parted her lips and moved her tongue past her slightly parted lips. She then put her tongue at the base of Naruto's dick and slowly moved up towards his head and then wrapped her tongue around his head and slowly brought her head towards it and engulfed the head, all while keeping her black eyes on Naruto's blue eyes, which had snapped open when she placed her mouth around his dick's head. Swirling her tongue around a bit and taking all the flavor Naruto's dick had, the Umbu woman moved her head down and started to take more of Naruto's dick into her mouth. Naruto was in a state of bliss. He had never felt this good in his life. Even when he had a ramen for a year voucher or when he became a ninja, this feeling was impossible to describe. He then felt the Umbu woman take his dick into her throat and started to deep throat him. Oh God, fuck you, I want break, said Naruto as he felt something come out of his dick that had made him sigh in relief and pleasure. The Umbu woman tasted Naruto's cum as it went down her throat, and at that moment, she didn't care about getting information out of Naruto. All she was concerned was getting his dick into her honey pot, which shouldn't be hard seeing as she was now dripping wet, as seen by the dampness that married her baggy Umbu pants. Standing up, the Umbu woman looked at Naruto with a small smile, before using her tongue to lick up some sperm that had drizzled onto her lips. Naruto's dick shot back up like lightning seeing the woman do that, and he couldn't admit to himself that if he died right now, he would be absolutely fine with it. The Umbu grinned before speaking once again. The name is Mai, and I'm going to give you a treat for passing the torture part of you test, although I might have been carried away as it was only meant to last for an hour, said Mai as she then grabbed her gray Umbu armor and took it off, soon followed by her long black sleeve shirt, which had released the pillows of life, which were bound by bandages. Naruto watched with his dick stuck firmly in place as the woman unwrapped her bindings, before eventually her breasts bounced out of their use to be restraints. Her breasts were a solid cup, not that Naruto knew that, and were as pale as her body and face, although her nipples were a rose-red color, just like her red lips. Naruto watched as she smiled at him in lust as her placed her hands under her breasts and lifted them up a bit before letting them drop and bounce a few times. Naruto watched as they bounced and permanently recorded they bounce in his head. Mai moved forward and placed her breasts right in front of Naruto's face. Suck on them, please, begged Mai as she swayed her breasts in front of Naruto's face. It was too much for Naruto, so he dug right into temptation. He started to suck the right nipple while swirling his tongue around the breast. He could taste the little bud, and it was amazing. It tasted like strawberries and smelt like once again roses. The woman was gasping. How was Naruto this good? She didn't know. She grabbed the back of Naruto's head and pushed his face deeper into her breast, which Naruto ignored for sucking her right nipple. After a few moments, Naruto switched sides and did the same process of sucking, twirling, and swishing on her nipple. Mai couldn't take it anymore. She needed his dick and stat. She moved her breasts away inadvertently, making Naruto cry slightly at not being able to taste those fluffy goodies. Naruto, Uzumaki, you are going to pleasure me now, got it, said Mai as she released his binds and moved all the torture equipment off the table before placing herself on it and spreading her legs out wide. Naruto just stared at the woman's lower part. It was completely clean, not an ounce of hair was seen. Naruto looked at the liquid dripping out of her snatch and decided to taste it. Moving his head forward, Naruto stuck out his tongue and went up to the liquid pouring out of the Mai. Placing his tongue at the bottom of the liquid, Mai moved his head and tongue up and collected all the sweet nectar that tasted exactly like her nipples, only to a more delicious type of strawberry. Moaned Mai as she reached for Naruto's head and pushed him into her pussy as he was not lapping up the juices at a fast pace. A few moments later, Mai let loose a scream and came all over Naruto's face, which he swiped off with his finger before sucking the cum on his finger. Mai was gasping. That was the best orgasm she had ever had, and that was just oral. The actual sex would be mind-boggling. Mai looked at Naruto as he was swiping and licking her juices up and smiled, before twisting herself so that she was on her hands and knees with her ass in the air. Naruto saw the position Mai was in and just stared as her ass was shaking from side to side. Mai moved her head down so that she could see Naruto's face and grinned. "While I'm waiting," said Mai as she slowed her shaking hips slightly, only to make it that much alluring to Naruto. Naruto climbed onto the table and looked at the dripping snatch and his dick. His heart was pumping, his blood racing, his mind buzzing. He couldn't take it anymore and slowly plunged into the woman, who was moaning into the feeling. Naruto just felt like he was getting a hug that was so intense it started to shake him. He slowly pushed more of his length inside the woman, who was moaning like she was in heat. He kept going until he hit something. Realizing what it was, Naruto snapped his head towards the woman, who smiled slightly and nodded. No one could last that long against my torture techniques. So here is your reward, said Mai as he shoved herself backwards and made Naruto's dick pierce her barrier and stayed inside of her for a few seconds, allowing Mai to calm down and then place her face to the cold metal table. Even though her face was on the metal table, she managed to mumble Naruto to start moving. Naruto nodded to himself. Before moving back and forth at a slow rate, he also moved his penis around while moving in and out of the woman before him. He heard the woman's groans of pleasure, and it made him quicken his pace almost instantly. Naruto could feel everything inside the woman as he started to rapidly screw the woman's brains out, while making sure it was pleasurable for her. Mai was induced into an orgasmic haze as she could only keep her ass in the air as Naruto screwed it. She never knew that sex was this good, otherwise she would have lost her virginity a long time ago. Naruto pounded into Mei's vagina and could feel something rise within him. "Mamai-chan, I am gonna come soon," said Naruto as he increased his pace, and soon if anyone walked in, they would see nothing but a blur between Naruto and Mei's connected places. "Me to Naruto-kun. Let's do it together. Don't worry about a kid. I took a pill this morning," said Mai as she started to participate by throwing her body backwards, which in turn shoved Naruto's dick further into her. The two were panting like mad for the next few minutes, and soon, their session ended. HHHH. Both moaned as they came at the exact same time. Naruto fell on top of Mai and moved her slightly so that her head was on his chest while still being connected at the hip. Even though Mai was taller and older, she just sighed happily before falling asleep. "Lemon, and hope it was okay for my first lemon." As Naruto was about to fall asleep, the door opened and in came Nico and Tiger. They just stared at him. Naruto looked at him and Mai and laughed a little bit before scratching his head with his left arm. "So do I pass this test?" asked Naruto as he looked at the two Umbu. With Tiger nodding before blood broke through his mask and sent him flying out of the room. Nico, however, just stood there staring at him for a few seconds before nodding before walking away and into the camera recording room and came out with a disc before leaving. Naruto looked at the direction the two Umbu went and shrugged before taking off his chakra restrictions and cuddling with Mai. Well, that was fun though, Naruto, before he went asleep. "Nah, is this going to be a regular occurrence here?" asked Naruto as he woke up in the middle of an arena surrounded by Umbu. Pushing himself up, Naruto looked towards the dragon-masked Umbu, who was in the center of the arena. "You, Naruto Uzumaki, will be facing off two new recruited Umbu and seeing how well you do against them. If you done well, I will tell you your new position and role. Fail, and you're out, and your memory will be erased about this place," said the dragon Umbu as he walked away from the center of the arena, while clicking his fingers again to summon the two Umbu. With a poof of smoke, the two Umbu appeared. Naruto looked at both Umbu, who had supported the same mask, although their appearance was also similar, apart from the one on the left had blonde hair and the one on the right had brown hair. Dragon looked at the three of them. "Fight," said Dragon as he watched both Umbu spring into action. Naruto watched as they dashed towards him. Moving a hand to his back, he summoned a kunai and dashed backwards, creating some space between him and the two Umbu while dashing Naruto through his kunai towards them. However, it missed both of them. Because of his kunai throw, he wasn't paying attention when they threw shurikens towards him. Naruto watched as most of the shurikens flew by him. Thinking it was luck, he hadn't noticed the wires around the kunai handles until he was trapped against the arena wall. Naruto gasped as the wire dug into his skin. He could feel some blood oozing out of some of the places the wires attached. Naruto watched as the two Umbu grabbed a kunai out of their holsters on their thigh and placed the blades towards his neck. "Do you surrender?" asked the blonde-haired one, only to get kicked in the back of his head. The black-haired one soon followed. Standing in front of Naruto was a Kage Bushin he had hinged into a kunai when he was training with the Kage. The Bushin used the replacement technique to swap himself with his boss, and then poofed away. Naruto watched as both Umbu dashed towards him as he was in between them both. Naruto started to vibrate his chakra, and with centimeters distance apart, Naruto moved the chakra into his body as watched as the two Umbu clashed with each other's kunai, where his stomach was, quickly smashing both across the face while they were in mid-shock at him being intangible. He quickly summoned two Kage Bushins to place restraint seals on them. Deactivating his intangibility technique, he went on one knee as he drew his breath in after wasting a large chunk of his reserves from only a few seconds. But it showed that Naruto was getting better as he didn't lose all his chakra in those few seconds. Thud, thud, thud. Three sounds appeared around Naruto in a circular formation. Looking up and around, Naruto watched as three blanker mask Umbu appeared and started to go through hand signs. Fire style, fireball jutsu. Three flaming balls flew at Naruto from the mouths of the three Umbu. Naruto watched as the fireballs came closer and closer. Sucking in air, he used the Shunshin no Jutsu to quickly appear behind each of the Umbu and place a seal on them before shunshining towards one end of the arena. Naruto watched as the three Umbu looked on in shock before they fell. Who wouldn't? He just used the Shunshin no Jutsu at a level that not even Shursui Uchiha could. His Shunshin was at a speed above Shizui's, which was impossible to track to even those of the Sharingan and other Dijitsus. So it would come to a shock when he simply appeared and reappeared and the Umbu falling to the ground. Although his Shunshin wasn't as fast as his Flash Step or the Hiraishin, it was good enough to be on par with someone with a swift release. Huh? Haha, that the best you got? Asked Naruto as he watched five more Umbu appear. He just had to say the same thing, he said to Mai. But if you think on it, he did get the best possible option there ever was. Naruto looked towards the five Umbu, going through hand seals and sighed. Damn Umbu, and making him show techniques. Naruto started to vibrate his chakra at a decently placed speed and watched as the Umbu finished their hand signs. Wind release, Gale Palm. Fire release, Dragon Flame Bomb. Water release, Water Spear. Lightning release, False Darkness. Earth release, Mud Dragon. Naruto watched as the techniques moved closer and closer towards his position. Quickly, he sent chakra to the top of his skin and disappeared. BOM. The five attacks rattled the entire arena as all the attacks connected to something, although no one could see due to the rubble releasing a dust cloud in the area that Naruto inhabited. The Umbu, who was in the middle of the five, nodded to his teammates before hearing a thud behind him. When he looked back, he saw the water user drop to the floor, soon followed by the lightning user. Move! Shouted the Umbu as he and the surviving Umbu jumped towards the other end of the arena, all in a circle formation with a small gap in between them. Can you see anything? Asked the fire user as he looked all around him and couldn't even sense an ounce of chakra coming from his direction. When he heard no reply, he slowly turned around and saw that both the wind and earth user were smashed into the ground. How did he not hear that? He didn't know. Feeling a tap to his shoulder, he slowly moved his head and saw nothing, before Naruto's fist emerged a few centimeters off the Umbu's face. Crack! The Umbu's mask shattered as he was sent flying into the wall as Naruto's form started to become visible again. Naruto stood there before looking towards the dragon Umbu, who nodded at him. Soon Nico appeared and grabbed his shoulder, and with a puff the two of them were gone. Umbu Commander Desk. When Naruto appeared, he quickly took a seat as his chakra reserves took a massive hit from his two most taxing techniques, which he still hasn't named yet. Naruto watched as the dragon Umbu appeared an instant after he sat down on one of the seats in front of the Umbu Commander's desk. The commander watched him through his mask for a few moments before pushing two canisters. One held ink and the other held nothing. Put chakra into the ink and then cut yourself to fill this canister with your blood, and then once again place your chakra into the blood, said the Umbu commander as he leaned back into his seat, waiting for Naruto to do as he was told. Seeing how the commander gave him clear instructions and how this was probably a small test itself, he quickly used some wind manipulation to slice open his palm and let the blood drip into the canister. Once the blood canister was filled at a decent amount, he placed his now healed palm over the blood and sent chakra into the blood, which changed its color into a deeper red. Moving his hand towards the ink, he repeated the process of adding chakra into it. When he saw that the ink glowed blue, he watched as the commander of Umbu grabbed an empty ink bottle and placed both his blood and ink together and started to mix together to form a very deep, almost black red. He then put the ink bottle on a small circle on the edge of his desk. Naruto watched as the bottle of blood and ink got wrapped by multiple seals before they went away, leaving the bloody ink. The commander looked at Naruto and indicated towards his shoulder. Knowing the process, Naruto took off his long-sleeved black shirt and Chunin jacket and aimed his arm towards the Umbu commander, who in turn smashed the ink on his arm, shattering the ink casing. Naruto bit his lip as he felt the bloody ink move its way around his shoulder before actually setting right on the middle of his shoulder. Naruto watched as the ink started to form into the Umbu symbols and could feel the ink and blood become a permanent part of him, most likely the seal's purpose. Soon the symbol on his arm settled down and glowed slightly for a few moments before dying back down. The Dragon Commander had not taken his eyes away from Naruto during the whole process. He just wanted to make sure, even after the extended tests he placed upon Naruto. "Naruto, Uzumaki, welcome to the Umbu Corps," muttered Dragon as he placed his hand forward, waiting for Naruto to shake his own hand. Instead, Naruto went on one knee and lowered his head down a bit. "Thank you, sir," said Naruto as he kept his head slightly down, making sure to be as respectful as he could towards his new commander. Dragon nodded towards Naruto as he did the normal procedure that Umbu does when they are being talked to unless stated otherwise. "Naruto Uzumaki, you will specialize in espionage and demolition heavy hitter. From now on, I will have you become a part of Nico's team when you are in Umbu duty. Is that understood?" asked Dragon as he stared through his mask's eye holes into Naruto's eyes. Naruto nodded as he accepted that he could very well fit into the espionage business along with demolition heavy hitter. Dragon then nodded to a wall full with Umbu masks with different animals. "Take your pick," said the commander as he watched Naruto move towards the wall before walking away. Naruto looked back at the commander before grabbing his fox mask and slipping it onto his face. "I think you know who I choose, sir," said Naruto as he looked towards his commander, who had tilted his head. Why do you choose the fox?" asked the commander, eager to hear Naruto's reasoning to it. "Why would deny who I am?" asked Naruto, getting a nod of respect from the Umbu commander in front of him and a hand on his shoulder from the purple-haired Nico. "Very true. You are excused until requested," said Dragon, getting a nod from Naruto before he disappeared. Dragon then looked towards Nico. "Along with Naruto joining your squad, I will also join to cover all bases. Dismissed," said the commander as he watched the Nico Umbu leave the area. Nico walked through the corridors of the Umbu HQ and had a single stray thought. "How will you shape the world, Naruto Uzumaki?" thought Nico as she continued walking towards her quarters. Boom, 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 boom. Every villager was looking for the sound that was shaking the entire village. All through the morning, sounds of explosions were running through the village. At first it had caused a panic, but with a few words from the Hokage, everything had come down. Naruto training field. Naruto was sparring against 300 clones of himself in a no-holds-barred fight. There was jutsu flying everywhere along with kunai, shurikens, and even the odd demon wind shuriken. Naruto himself was limiting himself to his own fists and defensive jutsu. He had been fighting his clones for the better part of 5 hours and had to remake his clones nearly each and every hour as he always defeated them. However, whenever he summoned them again, he added more chakra towards his clones, and they always got better with each wave and round. "Gra!" shouted Naruto as he slammed the final clone's head into the ground and poofing him out of existence. Naruto moved his arm away from the ground before falling onto his back. For the better part of the 5 hours, it was him using everything he had against clones that went through 5 levels, as he had only enough chakra for the 5 waves. They were in this order: Academy level, Graduate Academy level, Genin level, High Genin level, Low Chunin level. Naruto was smart enough not to just make clones that were on his level and fight against 300 of them. Sure, he could probably defeat 100, but they would be able to overrun him, and the only reason why he would somewhat defeat some of them would be because he knows what he would do, and thus what the clone would do. Naruto looked up towards the sky as he watched the clouds float on by. It had been 3 days since his Umbu trials, and he actually got a look on what a real Umbu's skill is around. He was invited to see Nico and Tiger battle each other with first blood wins. He saw how they used their environment and landscape to their advantage and how they used their skills to make quick tactics. However, Nico won when she used her blade. Apparently, she was a Kenjutsu master, the only one in the village, seeing as how their dead Chunin exams protector was the other Kenjutsu master there. Ping. Naruto turned his head towards the waterfall and lake. He felt someone enter his Fuinjutsu barrier, and the chakra source was going closer towards him at a walking rate. Getting into crouching position, Naruto quickly jumped behind the waterfall and into his hidden cave as he felt the chakra's signature come closer. Hearing a ruffling in the bushes, Naruto waited with his breath slow and steady, ready for an attack. What came out of the bushes was a monkey, just an average-sized brown monkey. Naruto's sweat dropped as the monkey just waited in the middle of the clearing, as if waiting for something. Naruto walked around the waterfall and into the clearing as he wanted to go and lie back down since it was a false alarm. "You do know that I'm right here, right?" asked a voice next to Naruto. Naruto tilted his head to see the monkey standing next to his head. Naruto blinked at it for a few seconds before tilting his head back into its laying position, thinking he just heard something else. "Why do you still ignore me?" asked the voice next to his head. Naruto once again tilted his head and saw the monkey just looking at him with its eyes focused on him. Naruto stared at the monkey for a few more moments before once again tilting his head back into its original place. Yep, he was defiantly losing his sanity. Smack. "I have been waiting for your reply for the past 5 minutes. And yet each time you look at me, you ignore me. Why the Hokage likes you, I have no clue," said the brown monkey as it stomped its feet next to Naruto's face. Naruto just stared at the monkey that was throwing a temper tantrum next to his head. Wait, hold up. Did that monkey just talk? "Ayahawa!" screamed Naruto as he quickly stood up and kicked the monkey away from him and into the forest as hard as he could. Naruto watched as the talking monkey flew a few thousand feet a second before turning into a star when it went far enough past the forest. Naruto looked around his clearing, seeing how the animals in the area just looked at him for a bit before walking away or flying away, although he could hear animals laughing in their native tongue if he had to guess. "Okay, and take a nap and forget about evening training. Maybe go in Konoha for a bit," said Naruto to himself as he laid down and made himself comfortable, before falling asleep while having the mental image of a red-haired woman pop up in his head as he slept. Hokage office. "Then the blonde asshole kicked me as hard as he could out of his clearing and out of the goddamn fire country," screamed a voice as it was jumping around the Hokage's room. That voice belonged to the monkey that Naruto just pelted away a few minutes ago. Hiruzen sighed a bit, trying to mask his laughter through his sigh as he heard the story of why Naruto hadn't appeared with his monkey summon. Another man in the room, however, hadn't tried to hide his laugh. Hiruzen turned his head towards his companion and scowled slightly in a friendly tone. "Jiraiya, shut up already and go get Naruto," said Hiruzen as he watched the man named Jiraiya stop laughing, although he was still giggling a bit. Jiraiya was a tall man with waist-length, spiky white hair that was tied back into a ponytail, with 2 shoulder-length bangs that framed both sides of his face. He also had red lines that ran down from his eyes, and wore a horned forehead protector with the kanji for oil on his forehead protector. He also had a face wart on the left side of his nose. Jiraiya also wore a green short shirt, kimono, and matching pants, under which he wore mesh armor that showed out of the sleeves and legs of his outfit. His outfit was completed with handguards, a simple black belt, wooden sandals, a red sleeveless hadori, with 2 simple yellow circles on each side, and a scroll on his back. Jiraiya just shook his head. "Nah, they'll just send a toad to get him. The little monkey probably scared him," said Jiraiya as he summoned a small toad with the same instructions that Hiruzen had given to his monkey summon. Hiruzen and Jiraiya watched as the toad leave along with Hiruzen's monkey summon. Both teacher and student sat there in silence, until Jiraiya pulled out his notes and Hiruzen pulled out his all-seeing crystal ball. Giggling could be heard from that office if anyone walked by. Naruto's clearing. Naruto just stared blankly at the two creatures in front of him. The one on his left was a toad, and the one on his right was the monkey he had kicked half an hour ago. "So you understand now?" asked the small toad as he watched Naruto slowly stand up. He didn't see Naruto move before both he and the monkey were sent flying. "What the fuck is this shit?" said Naruto as he walked towards the river and sat down and drank some water. Feeling movement besides him, he watched as a fox laid down next to him and started to drink some water. Naruto looked the fox in the eye for a few seconds. "You wouldn't be able to talk, would you?" asked Naruto as he stared at the fox with a narrowed eyelid. His response was the fox giving a very big smile at him before darting away. Naruto looked at the spot the fox occupied a few moments ago before standing up and walking out of his clearing. "Yep, nope, not dealing with it. I know for a fact foxes can't grin or smirk that wide. Definitely someone in a henge," thought Naruto as he walked towards Konoha as he needed to talk to people before he started to think that the trees could talk. "We can?" Naruto looked towards a tree that for some reason looked like it was somehow grinning at him. Naruto just stared at the tree before moving his chakra rapidly and in a very large frenzy and quickly disappeared in a flash of gold. Throughout the clearing, all the animals could be heard laughing as a small black crow hopped out of the tree that seemed like it spoke. "Ikaraku's. Oh Ramen, how could I have forgotten you? You too, I am an old man Ichiraku," said Naruto as he ate his chicken chili ramen with a fiery passion. Ayam and Ichiraku just watched as Naruto ate his ramen at an incredible rate, even for him before he disappeared for the Chunin exams and the week after it. Ayam moved up to Naruto and poked Naruto in the stomach, only to feel rock-hard pecs hidden behind his new dress code. Ayam blinked before smiling a bit. "Wow, Naruto, who knew you had all that muscle on ya? Have you holding out on me?" grinned Ayam as she looked at Naruto, who had looked at her with a raised eyebrow and a noodle handing out of his mouth. "Why would I try showing my muscles to my older sis? Are you into incest or something?" asked Naruto as he grinned at Ayam, who was sputtering at Naruto's comeback. Ichiraku was laughing loudly as he was creating some ramen for the other customers in the stand, who had also taken to laughing at Ayam. Ayam left with a huff and went into the kitchen with a slight but friendly glare at Naruto, who in turn just grinned even larger. Everyone in the stand was having a blast. They were just expecting it to be a boring lunch until Naruto appeared in the ramen stand. Then the drama popped up. While Naruto was laughing with the other customers, who had taken the step forward to talk to him, he missed Ayam walking out and starts talking towards a group of kunoichi. "I'm serious. He actually felt like a pure rock," mumbled Ayam as she talked to a few kunoichi who had been curious whether or not Naruto was actually muscly or not. One of the kunoichi decided to go see for herself. She stood up and walked towards Naruto's seat and pushed through some other customers that decided to hang out with Naruto for a bit as he was making everyone there laugh. Naruto didn't see it coming. The kunoichi walked up to him and grabbed the bottom of his shirt and lifted it up to his neck, showing his rock-hard abs and chest, along with each defined muscle hidden beneath his shirt. Ajay, he does have a rock-hard body. Oh my god, look at what he was hiding behind his orange monstrosity. He's mine. No mine. Naruto didn't need to know what happened next as he used his shunshin to disappear from the group of girls, who had instantly locked onto his position. Naruto watched as they got ready to follow him. Naruto looked at them for a moment before saying a few words that made them move. "Oh fuck me. Wrong choice of words." Naruto started to run away with chakra helping his muscles move as he dashed through the rooftops of many buildings as he tried to escape from his slowly growing chasers. How the hell did Sasuke get through this? Was it his emo-ness? Thought Naruto as he stopped and placed his hands in his pant pockets and stared aimlessly out towards the Hokage monument. Once again, wrong action. OMG, look at him. He looks so cool. I will heal his hurt heart. No, I will. No, me. Naruto stared at the group of girls as they slowly grew in numbers. He felt like he was going to cry any moment. Hey, did you notice that he's taller now? Oh yeah, He looks like he is like 16 or something, I know, right? He looks amazing. Naruto looked down at himself and thought for a moment. He hadn't realized that he had grown since the month break at all. Looking at his body some more, he would have guessed he was around 58. Haha, fuck you, Sasuke, you short fucker. Naruto got brought back to his train of thought when he noticed the group of girls started to move forward slightly. Naruto quickly pumped a massive amount of his chakra into his legs and dashed away, seeing someone below. Naruto grinned darkly before coming up with his plan. Hey, look who's down there and in need of loving, said Naruto loudly as he pointed towards the street below him and the following girls. Below on the streets. For Sasuke Uchiha, it was a good day. He got to eat some tomatoes, not talk to Sakura, walk around with people worshipping, not talk to Sakura, didn't talk to the dope, not talk to Sakura, and finally got some decent training in from Kakashi. Did he mention that he hadn't talked to Sakura? Ah yes, a good day indeed. Hey, look who's down there and in need of some loving, screamed a voice above him. Looking up, all the color of Sasuke's face drained away, leaving an Orochimaru kind of pale on Sasuke's skin. All he could see was hordes of kunoichi jumping down from the rooftops all around him. However, through the mass of fangirls, Sasuke was able to see who had staged his demise. His clue was blonde, spiky hair. Naruto. With a mighty cry, Sasuke started to run for his life and virginity. Naruto screamed Sasuke as he was sprinting away from that area. However, he then heard something worse than all his fangirls put together. Sasuke-kun, shouted a pair of blonde and pink-haired girls as they started to chase after Sasuke along with his other fangirls. Rooftop. Naruto moved a hand to cover his heart as he looked towards the direction of Sasuke and his fangirls. Sasuke Uchiha was a man who had saved my life today. About time the asshole paid me back for half the shit I did for him, said Naruto as he went towards the Hokage tower to see his Gigi. Hokage room. Naruto stood in front of his Gigi as he watched the two now-known summons growl at him from the corner of the room, while the white-haired man, named Jiraiya, stood on the opposite wall hiding his giggles from the summons. Hiruzen looked at Naruto with a smile. After the summon's second failure to retrieve Naruto, he had sent a Kagebushin towards Naruto's home away from home and brought him up to speed on what summons were and how the summoning jutsu worked, although he was sure that he'd forgotten something when explaining summoning to Naruto. Naruto looked towards the two summons and gave a peace hand sign, before turning back to his Gigi who had needed him for an important message, although if it was that important, wouldn't he summon his Umbu form? Hiruzen looked towards Naruto for a moment or two, before grinning a bit more. He knew how Naruto was going to act after this. Hiruzen then placed his Hokage face on and spoke in a tone that sounded godly and out of this world. Naruto Uzumaki, you are to travel with Jiraiya the Toad Sage to find the next successor to the Hokage seat. That person is known as Tsunade Senju. You are to find her and bring her back to the village, said Hiruzen as he stared at Naruto, only to see that he raised his eyebrow at him. So, you want a drunk and a horrible gambler to become Hokage? Are you trying to make our economy shit? Asked Naruto, only to watch as Hiruzen widened his eyes. How could he forget Tsunade's tendencies? Hiruzen coughed in his hand, trying to hide his sigh at realizing that Tsunade would be a bad choice to be Hokage. Without the proper training, thought Hiruzen as he thought of a new plan. Okay, Naruto, new plan. You and Jiraiya are to bring her back to be trained into being Hokage, said Hiruzen, as he watched both Naruto and Jiraiya nod their heads in understanding. Jiraiya looked at Naruto with the corner of his eye. Meet at the north gates in 2 hours, said Jiraiya as he jumped out of the window towards the bathhouses. Naruto looked at where Jiraiya stood and shrugged. He wanted to try the summoning technique his Gigi taught him. Looking towards his Gigi, Naruto gave the peace sign before sunshining away. Hiruzen sighed a bit before smiling and looked up towards the ceiling. Naruto, you will do amazing things. Konoha North Gate 2 hours later. Naruto sat on a tree as he swung his leg backwards and forwards as he waited for Jiraiya to appear. Naruto thought back onto how he got his summon. It was interesting to say. And he would have to ask his Gigi about why he forgot to mention that he needed to have a blood contract with the desired animal they wanted, or they will end up meeting the animal most connected animal to themselves. His experience was interesting to say the least. Ah! Naruto looked up as he watched a flying star collide with the hard concrete. Naruto watched as the flying star was really his new traveling companion. Walking up towards Jiraiya, Naruto picked up a stick and started to poke him with it. This lasted for a few minutes before Naruto eventually got annoyed enough and decided to wake him up with a lightning zap. Placing his hands on Jiraiya's chest, he started to vibrate his chakra while also changing it into lighting nature chakra. Aha, motherfucker of the great sage. What the fuck did that to me? Screamed Jiraiya as he jumped a few meters into the air as he felt his body start twitching in every direction after he landed on his feet. Naruto just grinned a bit before poking Jiraiya on the shoulder. Shouldn't we go now? Asked Naruto as he pointed towards the sun, indicating the time. Jiraiya nodded since he and Naruto might as well as start their journey to find the next Hokage. Forest 3 hours later. Naruto and Jiraiya walked in silences as they headed towards the nearest town to gather some supplies and get a place to sleep. During the 3 hours, it was nothing but silence as Naruto didn't see the point in talking and Jiraiya had no clue in how to start a conversation with the kid. Naruto sent chakra into his eyes to be able to see a village just a few miles out from their position within the forest. Naruto didn't know why he had decided to send chakra into his eyes one day after the Chunin exams, but when he did, he managed to notice slight changes when he sent chakra into his eyes. For one, they would give him an extended eyesight, and two, it gave him a slightly slower perception on movement around him, but even though it was slight, Naruto could easily see the benefit from it. While Naruto was checking the town a few miles out from his current position, he suddenly felt the 2 chakra signatures traveling towards both him and Jiraiya at a very fast rate. He also noticed that one of them had similar chakra reserves to that of Jiraiya, while the other one had high Umbu, low Kage amounts. However, he noticed that they stopped a few kilometers out from their position. Looking towards Jiraiya, he went through some Umbu hand signs and watched as the man gained a look of shock before nodding as they walked towards the town at a slightly faster rate. Town 1 hour later. Finally. Now I can go and lay down, muttered Naruto, trying to make the 2 followers think that actually was what he was going to do as he wanted them as relaxed as possible. Looking towards Jiraiya, or well where he was, he noticed that he had left with a trail of dust floating where he once was, although there was a note. Hey Naruto, I'm going to scout the area out, go pick a room. Oh baby, that's a nice ass you got there, and those tits. Whoops, I thought I was holding my notebook. Go get a room for us, okay? Naruto looked at the note for a second before chucking it into a bin as he walked towards a hotel. Jiraiya had forgotten to give him any money. Susu, he was going to pamper himself, even if it's just for a few minutes, as he felt the 2 signatures follow him and not Jiraiya. Walking up to the counter, Naruto flashed a smile and pulled out 160 yen out of his pocket. The woman in front of the counter was blushing slightly as she took in his features. Hi, what can I do for you? Asked the counter girl as she was stuttering as Naruto walked towards her. Hi, I'm Naruto Uzumaki, and I was wondering if I could rent a room out for a day or two, said Naruto as he handed her the money required to rent a room out. The woman nodded with a slight blush still marrying her face as she walked towards the back aiming to get a room key for Naruto. While Naruto was waiting, he noticed that the 2 chakra signatures were stationary outside of the wall and were handing by using chakra to hold them onto the wall. Holding out his hand to get the key, Naruto sent the girl behind the counter a quick wink and left. The woman had a large blush on her face as he left, as she couldn't help but squeal in joy that someone like him had done that. It was the best shift ever. As Naruto was walking towards his room, he looked down towards the key number and looked up. Spotting his room, he went towards his door. However, just before he got to his door, he tripped. While Naruto was falling, he quickly used his door as a support frame to hold him up. Naruto gave a quick sigh that no one was watching and quickly went into the room. Ignoring a slight snickering he thought he heard down the hall. Naruto went towards his bed and sat down against it and looked towards the door. He could feel them just outside of the door. So Naruto started to move his chakra to vibrate at an insane rate and waited for the 2 signatures to appear. Knock, knock, knock. Ah! Screamed a voice. Naruto grinned. Showtime. Pushing his chakra to the top of his muscles, Naruto dashed forward and through the trees, grabbing the two signatures by the throat and making them go through the walls before eventually through the entire building, which had sent the two men and Naruto flying back into the forest that was just a few meters away from the edge of town. Clearing. As Naruto was holding the two signatures, he saw the ground coming and decided to cushion his fall. Moving the two chakra signatures in front of him, he awaited the impact. Dust flew as the two men got smashed against the floor. Naruto quickly jumped off the two men and landed on the other side of the clearing. He knew that they were still alive, and he could tell that they were way above an average Jonin in level. This would be tough. Naruto started to draw in some of the nature energy that his summon had explained to him. He really didn't know that he could have turned himself to stone before, so now he was taking more precautions with nature energy. As Naruto felt the slight bit of nature energy replenishing his chakra, he watched as the two signatures stand up. However, the shorter one of the pair had an arm wrapped around his eyes, with blood going down his face from what Naruto could see. Naruto felt his chakra reserves go slightly above half and started to vibrate his chakra, ready to disappear at a moment's notice. However, he hadn't needed to, as the two shinobi just up and left. Naruto closed his eyes and started to follow the chakra signature of the two. He could feel them going north, towards Iwa and Suna. Opening his eyes again, Naruto was about to walk out of the clearing when his old teammate showed up. Sasuke looked around the clearing with hatred. He knew Itachi was here. He knew that he had went after Naruto as he heard a Chunin proclaim that Itachi was after Naruto Uzumaki, his teammate, who was ditching all their training sessions and missions. Looking around the clearing more, Sasuke finally found someone in the empty clearing. It was Naruto. But how would Naruto still be there? Itachi was after him. How could anyone survive meeting Itachi unless he lets you? Naruto? Asked Sasuke as he walked towards his teammate, noticing his new change of clothing, which looked similar to a Chunin. He didn't. Not before him. Naruto stared at Sasuke as he walked towards him for a few moments before nodding. He had no idea why Sasuke had come to him, although that would explain the smaller chakra signature that was at the edge of his chakra sensor range while moving. Naruto waved at Sasuke as Sasuke walked closer to him. Yo, Sasuke said Naruto as he watched Sasuke run at him at low Chunin speeds. Naruto, did you see a man with short black hair? Asked Sasuke, wanting to know the truth whether or not Naruto was getting chased by Itachi. Naruto tilted his head a little. That did seem like one of the people who he had just smashed through a wall or two. Yeah, why? Asked Naruto, only to see Sasuke activate his Sharingan. How are you alive? Asked Sasuke, looking into Naruto's eyes with his double tomo in both eyes. Naruto blinked before he shrugged. I am a lot more stronger since the Chunin exams. However, even I knew that I couldn't fight the dude with black hair and his friend in an actual fist fight. So I decided to blind whoever was there using a flash seal, which I placed on my door, along with a lightning seal on the floor, so when someone knocked on my door, they would get a flash to the face, which would blind them. Then a lightning surge through their body, momentarily paralyzing them. Then I pushed them through a few walls and into this clearing, at which they left, said Naruto, as if what he said wasn't that much of an achievement. Sasuke looked on in shock. His teammate just said that he forced Itachi away, along with someone else. He knew what that meant. He was strong enough to take on Itachi or any Jonin. If Naruto Uzumaki, the dead last, could force Itachi to flee, then he would be able to kill his brother. Which way did he go, Naruto? Said Sasuke as he grabbed Naruto's jacket, only to have Naruto grab his wrist. I don't know. I was getting out of that crater, lied Naruto, as he could see that Sasuke wanted to go after the two shinobi. However, he knew that Sasuke had no chance at defeating Itachi and the other guy, as he only won with quick thinking and by disabling them via flash seal and lightning seal. Sasuke kissed his teeth. Of course, a loser like Naruto wouldn't be able to find them, and only an elite Uchiha like him could if he was fighting. Sasuke turned his back and began walking towards Konoha. See you later, Dobe, said Sasuke as he walked past the edge of the clearing and into the forest. Naruto just stared at the direction Sasuke had went and simply went back to his room. Hopefully his mass changer seal activated and fixed all the walls. He could use some sleep. Hotel room. You did what? Screamed Jiraiya as he looked at Naruto, who was lying on the bed with a pillow on his face. I made Itachi and the Kisame guy leave, mumbled Naruto through the pillow as he was getting an ear full from Jiraiya, saying how dangerous and idiotic of him to even think of trying anything when he met two shranked neens, which Naruto had learnt not even 5 minutes ago. Naruto moved the pillow on his head a bit so that Jiraiya could see one of his eyes, which were thinned into a glare. Well, sorry that you left me all by myself when I told you that we had two people following us, said Naruto as he moved the pillow back over his face. Jiraiya went silent at that. The kid was right. He knew what Naruto was saying when he told him. Hell, how the kid knew Umbu hand signs confused him, but it didn't bother him much. After all, he spent a lot of time with the Hokage when he was younger. Jiraiya huffed. Fine, whatever. Let's go, I got Tsunade's trail, said Jiraiya as he walked through the front door. Naruto just sighed before summoning 10 Kagebushin. Poof. Naruto looked at the clones before he nodded towards the clones, which also nodded and started to unseal Fuinjutsu books. Remember, we need to finish volumes 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 in the 2 days that I rented this room, okay? And remember, do not pop until you memorized everything on the book in 2 days, and only pop one at a time. I don't need to randomly get a headache, said the original Naruto as he followed after Jiraiya. Forest. Naruto and Jiraiya were once again walking through the forest at a decent pace. It had been a few hours since they left their original town, and now it was beginning to darken. As Naruto was walking, he noticed Jiraiya constantly looking between him and the ground in front of him. It was like he was thinking about something but wasn't sure. Suddenly Jiraiya stopped and turned towards Naruto. Jiraiya looked at Naruto's curious face and decided to tell him about Akatsuki and about him training him for it. Kid, I gotta be honest with you. Those two people, Itachi and Kisame, are part of a larger organization whose sole purpose is to capture Jinchuriki and take their tailed beast out of them. Each member is apparently in Shrank Nin. Now I know that Shrank Nins don't always work together, so if they are in a group, the leader must be stronger than all of them. So because of that, I, the gallant Jiraiya, will train you to defeat any of the Akatsuki when you face them. And the key to that is to get you as strong as possible, as fast as possible. So, I am going to train you in Kyuubi's chakra, said Jiraiya with a grin on his face as he closed his eyes, knowing that Naruto was probably excited as hell to have a Sannin train him. Naruto looked at Jiraiya with a raised eyebrow. Seriously? Kyuubi? He wants him to beat a group of people who are looking for Jinchurikis, and he wants him to use Kyuubi's chakra? Okay, seriously. If the group was going after the other 8 Jinchurikis, wouldn't they have something that stops the other Jinchurikis from accessing their tailed beast? And about his training, seriously? He got taught by 3 Hokage. Sure, it was only for like 20 or so days, but still. In those 20 days, he managed to get from a low-level Genin to a mid-level Chunin. Then he had 10 more days to get his abilities up, with limited resources, but that was fixed with Fuinjutsu. Kami bless Fuinjutsu, the most overpowered jutsu type. Deciding to go along with it, Naruto just shrugged until Jiraiya added onto what he said. Also, in a few months' time, I am planning to take you on a training trip to master as much as Kyuubi's chakra as possible. Also, Sensei agreed that I could take you and that you should be able to handle your extra activities. I didn't get what he meant, but he did mention about you being a fox. Guess he meant that because of Kyuubi, said Jiraiya as he knew that Naruto would explode in joy at hearing he will be taught by a Sannin for 3 straight years. Naruto wanted to smash his head against a tree for the next hour or two, as he now needed to balance his Umbu work along with going on a training trip with Jiraiya. Jiraiya then opened his eyes and put his hand out in front of him. But I'm also going to give you 2 new jutsu. The first is the Rasengan. However, I don't think you have enough chakra control for that, so we're going to work on the next one. The summoning jutsu, said Jiraiya as he took the scroll on his back off and opened it up. Naruto watched the scroll open up and looked on in shock at the names there. Jiraiya. Minato Namikaze. Naruto gasped. His Tusan was a toad summoner? Why didn't he tell him? Hell, why didn't he tell him that there were things such as summons? But looking back on it, if he did somehow sign the toad summoning scroll, he would have never met his actual summon. Jiraiya watched as Naruto looked at the scroll for a moment before shaking his head, which confused him. It was like Naruto was saying no to the Toad summoning contract. Naruto looked Jiraiya straight in the eyes and sighed. "Look, Jiraiya, I already have a summoning contract, and I don't want to lose it," said Naruto as he watched Jiraiya's face morph through different emotions before just sighing at the end of his mood swing. Sigh. "Okay, kid, whatever. I guess I will teach you the Rasengan then." Okay. So quick background of the Rasengan. It was made by the fourth Hokage, and it took him 3 years to create it, and it took him 7 months to teach it to me. Now I hope that doesn't get your hopes down, okay? It's a difficult to rank technique, so don't feel down if it takes you a few years to master. Jiraiya was cut off when Naruto summoned a Rasengan in his left and right hand and was spinning them like a basketball. "You was saying?" asked Naruto with a grin on his face as he watched Jiraiya start to splutter about how it was impossible. Naruto then remembered a piece of information about Jiraiya he had forgotten. He was a Fuinjutsu master. Jackpot, motherfuckers. "Hey Jiraiya, could you train me in Fuinjutsu instead?" asked Naruto as he stared up towards Jiraiya, who looked shocked that Naruto wanted to learn a complicated art like Fuinjutsu. Jiraiya sighed a bit before deciding to answer Naruto's question. "I'm sorry, Naruto, but Fuinjutsu is a very delicate art that takes years to master. The only way I could ever train you in Fuinjutsu is if you pass the beginner and advanced part of Konoha's Fuinjutsu section," said Jiraiya as he handed Naruto Konoha's Fuinjutsu levels and study. When Naruto looked at the curriculum of Fuinjutsu in Konoha, he only had question marks pop up above his head, something that Jiraiya had noticed. "See, Naruto, if you can't understand the simple and advanced stuff, then you have no chance of Mas." Jiraiya was once again cut off when Naruto pulled out a scroll from a seal on his wrist. Jiraiya watched as Naruto looked at both scrolls for a minute before blinking and realizing something. Jiraiya. In my Fuinjutsu study curriculum, the beginner and advanced and master level of Konoha is on the beginner stage of my scroll," said Naruto as Jiraiya looked at Naruto's Fuinjutsu scroll. Jiraiya couldn't understand half the beginner's book of Naruto's Fuinjutsu scroll, but from what he got out of it, it was incredible and stupidly amazing. Naruto's scroll had everything. It even had highly advanced theory subjects within it like space, time, and dimension seals. If Naruto was halfway through the beginner part, then he would be considered a Fuinjutsu master in Konoha. "Naruto, I'm not going to lie. You are above a Fuinjutsu master in Konoha's standards if you got at least halfway through the beginner part of the book. So which part are you at, and can I also learn off this scroll?" asked Jiraiya, expecting Naruto's answer to be just a beginner. "I'm 3/4 of the way through the advanced sections, and sure you can borrow parts of the scroll," said Naruto as he then sealed his Fuinjutsu studies back into the seal on his wrists. Jiraiya just looked at Naruto shocked for a bit, before just nodding and deciding to forget about this event. "Okay, whatever. I'm going to go get some firewood. You set up a perimeter around the area, okay, Naruto?" asked Jiraiya as he watched Naruto nod in acceptance. "Sure, Jiraiya," said Naruto as he summoned a 500 Kagebushins when Jiraiya left. "Okay, you know what to do. 100 set up the perimeter, and the other 400 split yourselves between tree climbing and water walking if you find a lake. If you can't find a lake, make one, got it?" asked Naruto as he watched his clones agree and leave. Naruto laid against a tree and sighed. He now could finally rest. Not quite, yet Naruto said a feminine voice from behind the tree he was resting. Shooting up, Naruto looked for the source of the voice, but could not find anything. "Great, Naruto. You're so tired you're imagining things," thought Naruto as he was preparing to lay against the tree and fall asleep. However, he felt something grab his jacket. Suddenly, Naruto was flying through the forest and somehow managed to avoid all the trees he was flying at. Landing on flat ground, Naruto kept traveling until he forced himself to stop by sending chakra into his fingertips and slowed himself to a stop. When Naruto looked behind him, he opened his eyes in shock. Behind him was a waterfall, a very massive waterfall, if Naruto hadn't stopped when he did. Naruto shook his head and stood back up and looked around trying to find what had sent him flying. Naruto didn't see the knee that was behind him. Crack! "Ah!" screamed Naruto as he felt his spine snap, Falling forward, Naruto was ready to smash his face into the ground. However, that didn't happen. Instead, he was kicked in the ribs and smashed into a tree with enough force to make him stuck in it and not go through it. Naruto could only feel pain at the current moment. His snapped spine and broken ribs were sending a lot of pain through his system as he couldn't pass out for some reason, although he could feel Kyuubi's chakra start to heal him. But before he could help Kyuubi's chakra speed up with his own, he was sent flying towards the edge of the clearing and could be seen almost next to the edge of the waterfall. Naruto was looking through his squinty eyes to see who was attacking him. He saw someone there in front of him, definitely a female. However, his train of thought was cut off when the blur suddenly grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up. Crack! Ayaha! Screamed Naruto as he felt his other ribs break from a punch that the female blur hit. I thought that you would be better, Naruto Uzumaki, muttered the female blur, before she threw Naruto against the floor. Naruto couldn't even scream, it hurt too much, and he still couldn't pass out. He then felt the female blur pick him back up by the scruff of his neck. Naruto's eyes slowly started to see the woman that was destroying him better when she brought him up to her face. The woman holding him was not that much older than him, 16 if he had to guess. She had pure white hair that went past what Naruto could see, so it would be around her shoulder blades or back. Her eye color was pure red with a slit for pupils. Her face looked like it was sculpted from kami, and she had pointy fangs. He thought that she was a vampire as a joke. However, when she introduced herself, he was a lot more scared. Naruto Uzumaki, you disappointed me. Here I was expecting the one person who didn't die from summoning me during the Chunin exams would put up a little fight. However, instead I get someone weak and pathetic. I don't know how your will surpass my own, stopping me from absorbing you. But I will now have your soul and my essence back, said the woman as she started to wrap her hands around Naruto's neck and started to choke him to death. Naruto tried to move his hands up to try and move her hands away from his neck, but it was useless. He couldn't get his hands up to stop her. Naruto was struggling to breath. Well, when he could get a chance to breath. He could see the black spots appearing in his vision as he was starting to die. He could also feel his energy slipping away from him. He couldn't do anything against this woman. She defeated him. No, she destroyed him. We believe in you, Naruto. Bring peace to the world in our stead. Naruto watched as his vision turned dark, as he listened to the words his family said to him. Just a little more, mumbled the woman as she squished the neck in her hands. No. The woman looked at the person she was strangling strangely. She knew that he was still alive, for the moment, but didn't know how he was talking as she crushed his windpipe and was still choking him. I will not. Okay, now the woman was seriously wondering how he was still talking without any part of his throat intact. Give up, screamed Naruto as he brought one of his hands up to hold the woman's neck, and he quickly sent his other hand sailing towards her throat. Squelch. Naruto had embedded his hand with wind chakra as he went for the woman's throat, and because of the wind chakra, his hand went through her throat and decapitated her. Naruto stumbled backwards as he was free from the woman's grip. He didn't know what had happened. All he felt was a type of energy surging through his body before bonding with it. When it had, he felt something change in him. His chakra felt more potent and controlled. His body felt amazing, like it was 3 times as stronger and faster than before. But another thing he felt was a different energy being produced within his body. Naruto looked towards where he just killed the white-haired woman and widened his eyes. There stood the woman as if she hadn't gotten her throat cut clean from one side to the other. Naruto walked backwards as she started to walk forward towards him. Oh well, seems like my essence finally bonded with you, which means now I cannot kill you. But I could just make you my slave, said the woman as she walked closer towards Naruto, who held his hand out to his side at instinct for some reason. Naruto glared defiantly at the woman. There was no way in hell he was going to be a slave. Naruto then called out to his new energy being produced towards his hand, like it was instinct, and watched as a large metallic scythe formed in his hand. Ninja Gaiden 2 scythed on. Naruto watched as the lady in front of him looked shocked for a moment, before she grinned like she won $1 million. Oh, so my essence allowed you to become a Reaper, huh? Well, that changes what I had originally planned with you. Only if you manage to survive this, said the woman before she dashed at Naruto with a tanto appearing in her hand. Naruto had no clue as to fight with a scythe. He had only gotten katana training by Tobirama for a few days, and because of that, he was nothing more than Geninkenjutsu user. Not thinking, Naruto used his scythe to block an overhead slash. Naruto felt the tanto sapping his energy away from him, so he did what felt natural to him. He lifted his right hand up, which brought the scythe into a slope and made the woman go unbalanced. Quickly, Naruto spun around as he cleaved the woman in two from the hips. Jumping back, he watched as the woman reformed herself once again. Naruto simply blinked at the woman as she smirked slightly and disappeared. What happened next Naruto didn't know. All he knew was that he woke up back in his clearing where he and Jiraiya were camping. Jiraiya stood up and looked at Naruto for a bit before grinning. "Well, Naruto, we had a good sleep last night, so let's get moving. The next town has a few gambling dens, so Tsunade might be there," said Jiraiya as he started to walk, soon accompanied by Naruto, who had been thinking about a white-haired woman with devil-like eyes for the past few minutes. Town. Jiraiya sighed. He had caught wind that a massive snake attacked the castle and near the town, and eyewitnesses said that they saw a pale man and a blonde woman talking and causing the destruction. That was defiantly his teammates. Looking towards Naruto, he grinned. After being bored, he decided to show Naruto the arts of peeping. Not 20 minutes after he was taking notes like him. After that peeking session, both he and Naruto were able to talk to each other at a friendly level, which to Jiraiya made his day. "Hey Naruto, want to grab a bite to eat?" asked Jiraiya as Tsunade couldn't have gotten far unless she left with Orochimaru. And if that was the case, there will be hell to pay. "Sure, Erosenin," said Naruto as he smirked at Jiraiya, which Jiraiya in response just glared at him. "You know that you peep with me, right? So doesn't that make you an Arogak?" said Jiraiya, thinking he one-upped Naruto. "People don't know I'm a pervert, and who would they believe? An innocent Naruto or a pervert Jiraiya?" asked Naruto as he grinned towards Jiraiya a bit. Jiraiya sputtered when he heard that. The kid was right. He could always say something about him, forcing him to attend, and they would believe it. Smart brat. Naruto and Jiraiya walked through a door and went to the counter. While Naruto was ordering, he and Jiraiya heard a woman complain, which drew Jiraiya's attention instantly. And guess who he saw? Tsunade herself, sighting in all her glory with her assistant Shizune. Jiraiya nudged Naruto and saw that he looked towards Tsunade and whistled a bit. Jiraiya and Naruto stood up and walked towards Tsunade and her apprentice. "Yo, Tsunade!" shouted Jiraiya as he walked towards Tsunade's booth. While Naruto was walking towards Tsunade's booth, he felt an urge to turn his head to the left, and when he did, he saw her sitting there. The woman that almost killed him, she just sat there grinning at him. He could now see that she wore a white kimono with prayer beads wrapped around her right wrist. She also seemed to be wooden sandals. Naruto looked towards Jiraiya for a moment and, noticing that he was busy, turned his attention back to the woman, only to see a note on the table. Walking up to the table, Naruto picked it up and started to read it. "Naruto Uzumaki, you are different from the rest. I have never met someone who had somehow turned my essence into their own. It's quite different. Meet me outside at midnight, and we shall battle. Win, and you gain a reward. Lose, well, I get to have your soul. Enjoy your remaining amount of time, human, as I won't hold back this time." Naruto dropped the letter he was reading and was shaking. She was going easy on him. She was holding back on him. He survived because of luck. "The Hokage were fools," said a lady. Turning his head, it was Tsunade who had said that. Family or not, she was getting her ass kicked for that. Naruto walked towards Jiraiya and Tsunade as Shizune had gone to get some drinks for her and Tsunade. "What did you say about the Hokage?" asked Naruto with a dark undertone as he watched the woman repeat what she had said moments before. "The Hokage were fools," said Tsunade as she looked at Naruto for a few moments. "Just like you," said Tsunade. Two things happened when she said that. The first was Jiraiya trying to stop Naruto from grabbing Tsunade. The second thing was Tsunade being sent through the wall from Naruto, throwing her. Naruto turned his head towards Jiraiya for a moment and spoke a few words that made Jiraiya stop in his tracks. "I won't let anyone disrespect my father and great-grandparents." said Naruto before jumping after Tsunade outside. Tsunade didn't see it coming. All she saw was a wall and then a pain that shot through her sides. Standing up and healing herself, she waited as Naruto appeared. Tsunade gnashed her teeth together. This brat was going to be destroyed. I seriously don't know why Hokage wants you to be Hokage. All I see is a poor woman who can't take her grief, said Naruto as he stared straight into Tsunade's eyes. Tsunade hardened her amber eyes as she heard Naruto talk. How dare that brat think that her pain is so pitiful? He had no idea what pain was. With that, Tsunade dashed towards Naruto, who just watched as she went forward. For Naruto, this was a perfect example of why you always need to train. Tsunade was going at mid-genin speeds towards him, and she wasn't paying attention to her surroundings at all, which had caused her to not notice Seal lighting up when she went past it. Zap! Oh! Screamed Tsunade as she fell to the floor, gripping her ankle, which was fried and burnt. Tsunade looked at her ankle with tears of pain running through her eyes. When she looked towards Naruto, she expected 3 things to appear on his face. The first one was worry as he hurt the slug princess. Arrogant smile as he defeated a Sannin. Or scared as now she could get the old Hokage to kick the brat's ass out of the village. Instead, all she saw was disappointed mint as he looked towards her. She also managed to hear a few words he mumbled to himself. I can believe we are related to one another, muttered Naruto as he left the street as he needed to prepare against the silver-haired lady tonight. Tsunade watched as Naruto left towards the forest. She looked towards the ground in front of her and then stood up with Shizune and Jiraiya following her to her room. Tsunade then locked the door of the room and glared straight at Jiraiya. Who is he? Boom. 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 Huh. 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 What the hell? Are you? Panted Naruto as he held the left side of his ribs while spurting out strips of blood out of his mouth as he stared at the woman in front of him. The woman had pale skin with pure silver hair which went to her mid-back, and her eyes kept changing whenever she wanted. So far the colors she changed them were red, black, and gold, although she did keep the pupil split for each color change. The woman also wore a white kimono that was decorated with black ravens flying all around the kimono. She also had a black belt holding the kimono together along with wearing some black shinobi sandals. In her hand was a tanto, which she had been using since the start of their fight. He had no clue how long the fight had lasted. The reason for that was because they weren't in the land of the living as the woman described it. When he had gone out of the bar to confront the woman, he felt something grab his ankle and drag him into the floor. When he looked down, all he saw was a black portal, and that was it before waking up to the woman standing across from him. Oh, I'm a very special woman, that's all, said the grinning woman as she barely had any sight of damage on her. Naruto just sighed slightly before he dropped his scythe, which turned into dark smoke and disappeared. He couldn't keep up with her, but he was sure as hell going to try. Looking straight into the woman's eyes, he charged. Soon a spiraling sound was heard, and within Naruto's palm was his father's technique, the Rasengan. You know that I never thought about using this technique until I had perfected it. But I know that I got to pull all the stops to win, and I won't lose, not when I have people believing in me, said Naruto as he started to move wind chakra into the spiraling sphere, making it grow in size. The woman looked slightly surprised at the technique forming within Naruto's hand. She had met a lot of people who had fell towards the Rasengan during the Third Shinobi War, as the mortals themselves call it. However, this was something that seemed a lot stronger than the normal Rasengan. Naruto was watching the woman as he slowly increased the size of his Rasengan. He had never field-tested the technique, but this was a good time as any. Naruto lifted his technique above his head as he felt the wind emitting from the technique blow his hair and cloths backwards and forwards. Naruto looked the woman straight in the eyes as he noticed that she hadn't moved an inch. Sorry if this is the end of you, but I can't give up on my dream. After all, who would I be if I broke a promise, said Naruto as he slowly started to move forward before breaking out into a sprint. Now that shocked the woman. Here came Naruto coming closer and faster every step, and he was apologizing if he does kill her. Oh, he is defiantly interesting. However, she wasn't expecting the next thing Naruto did. Wind release. Raisin shuriken. The woman watched as the spiraling shuriken flew towards her at triple the speed Naruto was running at. She also watched as the technique ripped her cells apart at a microscopic level. Naruto looked towards where his new technique expanded into a large sphere and evaporated, showing nothing but clean cuts on the floor. Naruto went on to a knee as he was defiantly running out of energy from using that attack. Damn. I am out of chakra. I gotta get out of here, said Naruto as he slowly fell, face down onto the floor of the mysteriously dark room arena. Interesting. Seems to me that I will keep an eye on you. And much more, said the silver-haired beauty as she slowly grew from the darkness. Snapping her fingers, she watched as Naruto's body disappeared back into the living world. Clearing few days later. I don't want to study though Tobarama Sensei. Aha, not the water whips, screamed out Naruto as he jumped through the air and landed on his ass. Where the hell did I get out of that dark arena thingy? Asked Naruto to himself as he stood up and brushed some dirt of his Chunin jacket that looked like it was brand new and without the rips and tears that were previously on it. Naruto closed his eyes for a few moments as he stretched out his senses before gasping in shock. However, that gasp was forgotten for running towards his companion Jiraiya and his teammate Tsunade. He could also feel Shizen the area there. Castle clearing. Jiraiya looked at how the situation worked out. First, he and Tsunade went to have a drink yesterday, and then he woke up drugged and had no clue what was going on. Then Shizen rushes in and tells him that Orochimaru was planning to revive Dan and Nawaki in exchange for Tsunade to heal him. When he went to look for Naruto, he couldn't find a single hair of him in the whole town, and seeing as he had to stop Orochimaru, he had to hope that the kid would find him later on. When turned up to find Orochimaru and Tsunade, he was shocked that he turned up to find Orochimaru's arms were still in their purple form and Kabuto and Orochimaru battling Tsunade. Jiraiya watched as he saw Tsunade throw blow after blow towards Orochimaru and Kabuto. However, it was easily noticeable that Tsunade couldn't keep up with both of them. Getting his chakra to purge his system slightly, Jiraiya jumped into the fray along with Shizen. Forest. Naruto was walking with his hands supporting his waist as he used his left hand to help him stand and move past the trees within the forest. Suddenly, Naruto felt multiple masses of chakra suddenly appear. Shit. If I could feel them at this range, they must hold enough chakra to equal or surpass my own, thought Naruto as he grabbed his stomach where his ribs were hurting and dashed towards the chakra signatures he felt appear. Castle clearing. When Naruto arrived, he came upon the site of Orochimaru and was that Kabuto battling Jiraiya and Tsunade on their summons. He saw Shizen hidden behind Jiraiya and was healing him while battling. However, Naruto noticed one thing during the Battle of Sanins, and that was the fact that Orochimaru's summon was a massive snake that was beating both the Toad boss and the Slug boss, if he had to guess. Naruto looked down towards his hand and sighed. This fight was going to have him drained to a point of KO. Looking up towards Jiraiya's direction, Naruto jumped towards Jiraiya's position and started to plummet to the ground. Summoning Jutsu. Piolef. Kye screamed a raven as it flew with Naruto on its back. Jiraiya looked like he was seeing a mixed bath that only let supermodels and Sannin in. Tsunade had a look of shock as the raven summon landed on the ground and Orochimaru. He started to turn slightly more pale. Kabuto, however, had seen Naruto in action. He missed Naruto versus Kage and wasn't worried. The raven looked around the clearing and saw 3 other summoning animals, all prepared for battle. Looking up towards her summoner, she spoke in a soft tone. Why have you summoned me, Naruto-kun? Shouldn't you have summoned Ti? The raven was cut off by Naruto, placing a finger to his mouth. I couldn't summon anyone else, although Hawk would be good. He's not as agile and fast as you are, adding into the fact that you can use shadow release along with being able to take souls. The raven nodded its large head as she now understands his reasonings. Very well. Who is our enemy? Asked the large raven as she spread her wings preparing to take flight. The snake replied Naruto sharply as he started to empower the raven by making a chakra shield that held snugly against the raven. Orochimaru was panicking. Sure, he could take on Jiraiya and Tsunade along with Shizen, but Naruto with a summon? It would have been difficult, and that was if the blonde brat was still a weakling. Kabuto, muttered Orochimaru, as he watched Tsunade and Jiraiya started to look towards him. Reverse summoning jutsu. Now, muttered Orochimaru, only to get a earth-shattering punch to his spine, followed by a side kick to the ribs and into Kabuto. Piolef. Orochimaru and Kabuto looked towards the poof and widened their eyes. There stood Naruto's raven with Manda's eye dangling from her beak as she looked towards them and ate it. Orochimaru looked at Kabuto frantically. This was not the time to fight. Now Kage Orochimaru was cut off when a knee smashed him in the face. You know that I won't let you leave alive, right? Dadabayo asked Naruto as he was standing in front of Orochimaru's prone body. Clap, clap, and clap. Kabuto was walking towards Naruto and Orochimaru, his bruise from getting smashed into by Orochimaru healing before Naruto's eyes. Kabuto's healing rate was nothing, Dadabayo. Naruto tilted his head as he looked at Orochimaru and Kabuto for a moment, before a light bulb appeared over his head, which had slightly scared Kabuto as it just appeared. Oh, I see. So you're Orochimaru's buddy? Asked Naruto with a curious face, although that soon went away when Kabuto glared at him. Naruto shot Kabuto a shit-eating grin. So I guess that's a yes. Naruto watched as Kabuto glared at him and sensed some killing intent at him for a few moments. At least I'm not a dead lass, said Kabuto as he moved ever so slightly towards Orochimaru while preparing to use an escape technique. Naruto raised his eyebrow. It was only because of his Kage training that he knew that rank meant nothing. After all, if Hashirama could beat his dad at the age of 15 in a full-scale fight without his Mokuton, there were no limits if you improve yourself with all you got. However, Naruto grimaced a moment before he fell to his knee holding his rib, which he just felt crack from the amount of chakra he surged a few minutes ago. Kabuto saw this as his chance. He quickly dashed over to Orochimaru and disappeared. At that moment, Jiraiya and Tsunade had appeared, along with Shizune and a pig. Jiraiya went to Naruto's side as he saw that Naruto was cradling his ribs. Kid, you okay? Did Orochimaru injure you? Asked Jiraiya, only to get a shake of the head. No, I got it. From an injury in training a couple of hours ago. Grimaced Naruto as his ribs were healing at a slow rate as his chakra was pretty low. Poof. He suddenly felt a large amount of his chakra return to him. Looking for his raven summon, he mentally thanked her as she went back home and returned Naruto's leftover chakra. Tsunade watched as Naruto stood up and started to fix his visible broken ribs, heal them. Tsunade had never seen anything like it, apart from when she had healed Kushina back when she was in her teens, although Kyuubi was apparently an asshole who would rather wait a few years to form after Kushina's death rather than wait sealed inside of her. She was sure she heard something along the lines of chains and a moon, but she must have heard wrong. Naruto gave his arms an experimental movement along with his legs. Seeing how they were fine, he turned towards Tsunade for a moment before asking his question. So do you agree to become the Hokage? Asked Naruto, awaiting her answer. Tsunade looked at the ground Orochimaru had lay a few minutes ago and sighed. Jiraiya had told her about Orochimaru's plan of reviving them by Edo Tensei, and even she wouldn't want to see her lover and brother in that form. Then she looked at Naruto, who had not only injured Orochimaru, but had also forced him to flee along with his snake summon. Tsunade sent a look to Shizune, who had nodded to her questioning gaze. Finally feeling like her resistance broke, Tsunade nodded. Yes, I will be the 5th Hokage, screamed out Tsunade with her fist in the air. Naruto nodded before going to a knee and placing his Fox Umbu mask on. Nice to meet you, Hokage-sama. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Public rank. Chunin, secret rank. Umbu recruit, said Naruto as he waited for Tsunade to snap out of the shock of him being an Umbu. However, he had forgotten to mention this to Jiraiya. What? Since when were you Umbu? Screamed Jiraiya only to get Naruto's hand to his mouth. You don't tell people I'm an Umbu, Dadabayo, said Naruto as he looked at Jiraiya, who nodded and calmed down. But you are going to tell me what you mean by special rank, said Jiraiya as Naruto sighed. Fine. Naruto watched as the trees blared by due to the speed he was going through the trees. It had been a few weeks since Tsunade's coronation as the fifth Hokage, and Naruto was finally joining in some Umbu missions. He had been moved through each Umbu unit, and he could honestly say that Umbu Nico team was the best. Although he had heard rumors that the Nico Umbu captain was trying to kill herself in missions, or either go until she was apparently broken and had no use left. This confused Naruto for a while before he eventually asked one of his more permanent teammates Mai about why the Umbu captain Nico wanted to end herself in a mission. Mia explained to him how a Jonin named Hate had died between the second and third Chunin exam phase. When Naruto heard that, he instantly remembered a sick Jonin protector for the preliminary matches. When Naruto got more information from Mai, like he coughed a lot and had brown hair, he instantly remembered who Hate was. Naruto had spent the following days making sure to help the Umbu captain out with simple things, such as helping her shopping and all. The reason for this was because he found out that she also started to starve herself by only eating nutritional bars which were made for shinobi, but those were only to fill up a ninja's stomach enough to last a few days. It doesn't give a lot of nutrition and was only made for emergencies like if a group of shinobi were stranded in the middle of the ocean or desert. He still remembered the look of shock on Nico's face when she went to her apartment, only to find the whole living room table stocked full of food that would last since he placed seals on them that would allow the food to be in stasis when not being eaten. It was pretty smart, as if you were full with something you could wait a few hours before going back to it, and continues where you left off without having to warm it up or anything. Nico's face was frozen in a complete shock and slight happiness if he had seen her eyes giving off a bright shine. Now, while Naruto did work under the Umbu captain, he still hadn't heard her name. It was frustrating as Naruto had known each and every Umbu by first-name basis. Naruto soon collected his thoughts as he looked towards the left a slight bit and watched as his team were being hunted by 3 Kumo storms, which were their version of Umbu. Naruto then looked towards his left. Mai, Umbu Weasel, had blood flowing out of her arm at an insane rate, and it needed to be healed ASAP. Turning his head to Tiger, he saw that the man had both his arms broken due to the initial ambush. How he was able to keep on running at the amount of pain he probably felt. He didn't want to know. Then Naruto looked straight ahead at Umbu Nico. She had the most injuries, and yet they didn't seem to affect her. She had a massive slash mark going from her left shoulder to her right hip. It was lucky her spine hadn't been caught in that cut, or she would be paralyzed. She had her right elbow shattered and her left shoulder dislocated. Naruto then looked at himself. During the ambush, he had swarmed the place with Kage Bushin and managed to kill an Umbu group due to the shock of 200 clones swarming them. But Naruto had sustained damage as he protected Umbu Nico from a stab, although the wound was already healed along with his used-to-be fractured jaw. Naruto looked back towards the group of shinobi chasing after them. He knew that they would probably hunt his team down even when they got to Fire Nation border. So Naruto did what Narutos do. He attempted to sacrifice himself. Landing on the next tree branch and swirling himself towards the storm ninja, Naruto started to vibrate his chakra. He could feel the bring blue energy flow through him. He could feel his blood and organs syncing with his chakra. Then, he brought it to his muscles and disappeared. Umbu Nico had looked back to check on Umbu Fox, aka Naruto Uzumaki, to make sure he hadn't been left behind as they were running at intense speed. When she looked back, though, she instantly stopped on the next branch and turned her body only to watch as Naruto disappeared. This brought pure shock as she and the other 2 Umbu watched as Naruto disappeared. Like a flash. The storm shinobi didn't know what hit them because they didn't know what happened after a nanosecond of Naruto disappearing. Snap, 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 snap. Team Nico watched in shock as all the storm Umbu simply died in less than a second. They then caught sight of Naruto gasping for breath with blood flowing through his mouth. He looked up towards them and slowly brought his hands up into a thumb-up position before passing out. Nico stood frozen at what Naruto did, but soon got out of her funk when she saw that neither of her team was moving. Jumping towards Naruto's branch, she attempted to pick him up, only to feel her arm once the adrenaline left her system. Biting her lip beneath her mask, Nico crouched down to try and grab Naruto's body. However, Naruto decided to pop back to life, while also spitting his blood forward and indirectly getting Nico's arms covered with blood along with a part of her mask. However, then, at that moment, she felt something in her arms change. Looking towards her arms, Nico watched as her shattered elbow visibly healed before her very eyes. Looking towards Naruto, who also had a very big shock from what his blood had just done, Nico honestly thought that Naruto knew and that's why he spat at her, although the look he had given her suggested otherwise. Naruto was in a state of shock. His blood could heal people. Seriously, he could heal people with a bit of blood? That was amazing. Now, while he was training his chakra control so that he could learn Hashirama's medical techniques, he could heal his team with his own blood. It was probably because of his Mokuton that purified his system that allows it to work. Praise the log. Naruto then slowly moved his hand up towards Nico's dislocated shoulder and pushed it back into place as his blood slowly worked its magic. Naruto then slowly felt his own organs within his body calm down, since he was still feeling the after effects of his speed technique. He really should name it sooner or later. Naruto looked at Nico's eyes beneath the mask and smiled slightly before passing out against the tree. Nico couldn't believe it. Naruto's blood could heal injuries at near minutes. He could probably be better than Hokage-sama if he just used his blood for any injury. Then Naruto mumbled something as both Tiger and Weasel appeared. Run, sonic booms. In a few minutes, went too fast, mumbled Naruto as if he was telling them through sheer need. Nico quickly wiped the blood off of Naruto's face and threw it at both Tiger and Weasel and quickly smeared some blood on her back. Nico felt how the blood began to make her skin stitch back together with a more durable layer of skin. She then looked at her two teammates, who also had their injuries healed and were gaping at their now healed limbs. We have to get out of her. You heard Naruto, a sonic boom. Although I don't know what that is, I know it's bad. Let's move. Konoha is at least a few hours travel at our usual rate, said Nico as she grabbed Naruto and put him into a piggyback position and quickly grabbed his fox mask that had fallen off when he laid against the tree after his speed technique. Both Tiger and Weasel nodded before dashing off with Nico in the lead away from the battle site. A few miles later, the team all of a sudden heard a massive boom in the direction of their encounter with Storm Shinobi. When Nico turned to take a look, all she saw was the air itself exploding and pushing the entire forest in that area away in a perfect circle, although the direction they had went hadn't been affected for some reason. Naruto had instantly snapped his eyes open when he heard the boom and quickly searched for his teammates, although he didn't have to look far as they were right in front of them. He then looked down to where he was and felt Nico holding him piggyback position, and he realized where his hands were. Was that why he was dreaming of fluffy pillows and him squeezing them? Naruto then looked back towards his sonic boom as he had taken to call it and cheered, which had alerted everyone he was now awake, while also causing Nico tick marks above her head as Naruto was still fondling her breasts. Not that she will tell him to stop, until the other two notices. Now that was a sonic boom, baby, said Naruto as he kept his eyes on the forest that knew had a large circular hole in it. Mai and Tiger had looked on and had to admit that was pretty cool, even by their standards. Even Nico had nodded about it being cool. However, that soon ended as Nico started to take the lead with Naruto still on her back and the other two following on their trip back to Konoha. Konoha. It had been 3 hours of constant running for the squad. Naruto had been able to run after the hour mark and had carried Nico as she had begun to tire due to carrying Naruto. It was quite embarrassing for Nico as she had been picked up and carried by the 13-year-old, even though he looked to be 16 due to his extreme height of 62, which he somehow gained during the Chunin exams month break. Nico looked up towards the large gates of Konoha and released a sigh. Her team had been set up for a false mission and now they had to report it and blacklist the client that had requested them. Nico could only imagine the paperwork to come before Naruto, with his fox mask on, grabbed her shoulder and gave a slight squeeze. Hey, don't worry about the paperwork, I got it, said Naruto as he used the Shunshin to teleport towards the Hokage Tower, making the rest of his team sigh in relief as they simply wanted to go home and relax. For Nico, however, She hated to go home. It reminded her of her boyfriend Hate who died. Grumbling to herself, she reluctantly went towards her home in the Umbu sector, which was protected by a lot of hidden seals so that if their identities were found, no one could attack the Umbu's family directly or the Umbu themselves unless they break through the seals and defeat Umbus who live there. Nico quickly shuns Hein towards Umbu HQ and quickly deposited her Umbu garb and changed into her Jonin garb. Although she didn't have a long black sleeve shirt like most, she had a short sleeve one. Shun shining once again, she reappeared in front of her home. She went to unlock the door only to find that it was already unlocked. Narrowing her eyes, the Nico Umbu slowly opened her door, only to jump in shock as 4 people sprang up behind her couch and yelled surprise. The Nico Umbu looked shocked. She had no clue that this was going to happen. How one of the people who jumped up had been with her a few minutes ago. There stood her friends and teammate. Anko Mitarashi, Kurenai Yuhi, Hana Inazuka, and Naruto Uzumaki. She did the first thing that popped up into her head. Throw the closest thing at Naruto, as he was only a teammate. That thing she threw was a book. A 900-page book. Thud. The 4 women watched as Naruto was on the floor twitching his leg every few moments. It was complete silence. Ha 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 ha. For a few seconds, Anko couldn't keep herself from laughing at the image of Naruto on the floor twitching with a heavy book on his face. Anko was soon joined by the rest of the women in laughing at Naruto. Naruto himself slowly pried the book of his face and looked at the cover and started to twitch his eyebrow. The book title was How to Dodge for Genin. That hurt Naruto's pride very much. Naruto then turned towards the 4 laughing women, who were now on the floor, and stuck up a finger at them. Anko slowly started to stop laughing, but one look at Naruto and once again cracked up. Naruto was now a twitching mess. His eyebrows were visibly twitching at an insane rate, and he started to chuckle slightly, a very evil chuckle. Keep laughing, because after today, the prankster from hell will strike you all, muttered Naruto as he gave off a creepy grin, which made all the girls there stop and start to shake in slight fear. However, Naruto soon dropped his evil smile and gave off a slight grin. Well now, are we going to hold your party, Miss Nico? Asked Naruto as he watched the girls stand up agreeing. The Nico Umbu had no clue how this happened, but wasn't going to complain, although there was one thing bothering her. Naruto, what about the Umbu report you said you would hand in? You didn't lie, did you? Asked the woman with narrowed eye glare, which brought the other woman to glare at him too. Naruto looked at his captain like she was stupid for a bit and muttered 2 words. Kage, Bushin, said Naruto, which instantly made his captain calm down. Naruto then to give his captain her present, and he was sure he would get killed for it if a certain someone found out his new ability. Well, Captain, seeing how I don't know you well, I wanted to give you a present and a party. So hey, race my present, although it will go away in 24 hours, okay? Naruto watched as his captain nodded her head, and he slowly moved his hands together like in a pray position. The woman there watched as Naruto started to have a black energy surround him, and it terrified the woman there. It felt like death, pure death. Slowly, Naruto moved his hands in front of him and created a portal. This was something he found out during his battle with the Death Goddess. He had a few days ago during his mission. He didn't know why, but the goddess would attack him at night at random times and always display a new technique, which he himself then tries to replicate. However, this technique was given to him by the goddess after defeating her for the 30th time. The technique allows the user to summon a soul to battle with them, but to do so the user must have a higher amount of spiritual energy, and since chakra is made from 50% spirit energy and 50% physical energy, you would need Jinchuriki reserves to summon the higher tier of ninjas, as their energy was now complete spiritual energy until summoned. But another point of it is that if anyone is absorbed and sealed inside of the Shinigami, they are unsummonable entirely, so no Hokages to train him again. But there was the drawback of them using your physical energy to keep them in the land of the living, and because of that the user would get tired more quickly as their strength gets used up faster by the amount of people they summoned. Another downside is that once you kill them, they dispel. Naruto was focusing on the portal in front of him and slowly found Hayat's signature within the portal. Extending his energy, Naruto slowly pulled out hate from the land of the dead and watched as his body started to become physical in the land of the living. The Nico Umbu and the rest of the girls watched in shock as a ghost replica of hate started to appear before it started to gain skin and clothing. Soon the hate replica formed completely and fell to the floor as if lifeless until the body groaned. Naruto watched as his captain looked shocked at the slowly standing body of her dead lover. Naruto then closed the portal and had reabsorbed his dark energy and turned to his captain. There you go, Captain Nico. The revive for 24 hours hate. Also have a great birthday, said Naruto as he shuns hind home. The Nico Umbu watched as her lover stood still for a moment before jumping to her and giving her a hug. Yugao, it's nice to see you again, muttered Hate into Yugao's ear. Slowly Yugao wrapped her arms around Hate as well and enjoyed her hug, ignoring that he had just been revived in front of her. Anko, Kurenai and Hana just looked on in shock as the two lovers reunited since the Chunin exams break. Anko slowly turned her head towards her friends and asked a question each one held. Did you see that too? Naruto's apartment. Naruto looked around his apartment and sighed. He was still in his Umbu garb and couldn't be bothered going to HQ to place his stuff there. Either way, who cares if they find out he was the Fox Umbu? He was a Jinchuriki anyway, so what's the point of being found out? Slowly taking his Umbu armor off and placing it on top of his bed, Naruto walked towards his kitchen and started to cook some stir-fry for himself. He watched as the rice and chopped up vegetables and soy sauce mixed together to make a heavenly smell and gave a sigh of the amazing smell. Sure, ramen tasted better, but even ramen couldn't smell this good. Unless it was Ikaraka's ramen, then this held no candle to the ramen there. So what is it that you are making? Asked a voice behind Naruto. Naruto instantly hardened his eyes before twisting his body instantly, ready for another showdown to the death, as the woman put it, but that would only work if you could actually die in the first place. However, when Naruto turned around, his mouth opened in shock and his eyes widened in absolute shock. There sat the Shinigami at his table, wearing a tight white shirt, which looked like it would rip due to her large breast size at any moment. She hadn't changed anything else, but he could also see that she wore white long pants, although they could be considered skin-tight, as he could still see all her body through the material. The Shinigami looked at Naruto with her crimson red eyes and grinned slightly. Naruto was in frozen shock, and she was enjoying every second of it. Naruto shakily raised a finger at her and tried to form words, however he just seemed like he couldn't. The Shinigami grinned even more before standing up and walking around the table and in front of Naruto. She was also about the same size as Naruto, being around 62-63. She then slowly brought a pale hand up and pulled his jaw up so that it wasn't hanging and grinned even more larger and brought her lips towards Naruto's. Naruto watched as her lips changed color as they went closer to his own. Originally, they were light pink, but then they changed into light purple and looked glossy. Naruto tried to force his body to move as it was likely a trap. However, his body was frozen stiff and couldn't even try to move itself. Soon their lips made contact and Naruto felt like he died and went to heaven and was being served ramen every day, as it was the food of the gods. The Shinigami was surprised that the kiss felt as good as it did. She was only trying to poison him, but instead of dropping down dead for her to claim him, she instead felt the pleasure of the kiss and couldn't attempt to poison him more than just the weakened formula. Slowly, Naruto brought his hands around the Shinigami's back and wrapped them around, pulling the goddess closer towards him. This was soon followed by the Shinigami, who had wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck and sank into his body. The two kissed for a few minutes until Naruto needed to breathe, which bummed out the Shinigami a bit, before she gave a grin towards him and walked towards the table and sat down with a plate magically appearing in front of her. Seeing the plate, Naruto paled slightly as he thought that his food would have been burnt to ashes, but when he turned around he was pleasantly surprised that they were cooked exactly how he wanted them to be. Grabbing the wok he had used for the stir-fry, he quickly dumped the food into a large bowl and started to place some on his plate before taking the large amount of food towards the table and filling the Shinigami's plate up for her. Naruto then sat down on the opposite side of the table, facing the death goddess head-on. He then started to eat his rice and vegetables, soon followed by the Shinigami. The lunch was a very silent one. I mean, how would you talk to death? Who was drop-dead gorgeous and could kill you at any moment. The Shinigami was on her 5th serving as the food was incredible, and because she didn't need to eat, she would never truly be full. Naruto himself was only on his 2nd serving as he was starting to fill up from all the food. Soon he heard the Shinigami ask him for water. Deciding it was good for his health, he stood up and walked towards his fridge and grabbed a jug that held cold water. Moving his hand to the left where a cabinet was, he picked up a bamboo cup and started to fill it up with water. Midway through filling up the cup with water, he felt someone wrap their arms around him and place their head on his shoulder. "Thank you for the lunch, Naruto-kun. Just for that, I'm changing the way I'm having you," muttered the Shinigami into Naruto's ear. Naruto, wondering what the Shinigami meant, turned his head slightly to see the Shinigami already in a kissing position and quickly grabbed his head and forced him into her kiss, which Naruto was more than happy to accept and return. However, Naruto soon snapped out of what he was doing and brought his head away from the death goddess and looked at her lips. They were green this time. Naruto quickly wiped his lips and looked at his long black sleeve shirt and saw green marks slashed along his arm. He looked back towards the Shinigami and dashed out of his apartment and onto the roof across his apartment. Naruto jumped as far and as fast as he could. However, he was nothing but a mortal reaper. Soon the Shinigami had appeared next to him and ran alongside him. The Shinigami laughed at him, which drove Naruto to run faster, trying desperately to escape. He didn't know why, but he knew if he was caught he was screwed. He also had the feeling that the kiss the Shinigami gave him was a weak, less potent version of the real thing. But once again the Shinigami caught up to him and grabbed him, which in turn stopped him dead in his tracks. Now calm down, Naruto. "I'll take my time with you," said the Shinigami as her pink lips turned into a darker shade of green. Naruto watched as she brought her head closer towards his. He would not be a slave to anyone. Vibrating his chakra and sending it towards his skin, he watched as the Shinigami went through him as he moved forward and started to vibrate his chakra once again and sending it towards his muscles. And with a streak of yellow he disappeared, until the Shinigami caught his fist from her right side. She grinned as Naruto's face shone shock. He had traveled at a speed that should be impossible to stop or dodge. Crack! A knee to the stomach stopped Naruto in his tracks as he fell to his knees with his fist still being held inside the death goddess hand. The woman grinned even more before letting Naruto's hand drop to the floor as she turned away from Naruto and created a portal to travel back to her domain. She turned her head back towards Naruto one last time and winked at him before she disappeared into the black abyss of a portal. Naruto laid there holding his now healing ribs as he watched the dark portal collapse on itself. Slowly, Naruto stood up and began to limp his way down to the street below. When he landed, he forgot one important thing. He was in Umbu uniform, and his Umbu tattoo was showing as his long-sleeve shirt ripped while running. What's worse was teams 7, 8, 9, and 10 standing without their senseis there, and were looking at him as he was holding his ribs due to the pain he felt from the goddess's attack. Naruto watched as each of his fellow Genin graduates had shock running through their faces as they looked at Naruto's garb and tattoo. Naruto moved his hand from his now healed ribs and scratched the back of his head. "So, cool costume, right?" asked Naruto as he had a shaky smile written upon his face. However, he then saw that both Sakura and Ino were about to open their mouths, and using his flash step, he quickly duct-taped both their mouths before they could likely scream out he was an Umbu. The other Genin there were looking at Naruto in pure shock, while all except Sasuke, who was showing rage through his face as he stared at Naruto's shoulder tattoo. Suddenly, Naruto's head perked up as he saw a hawk in the air and brought his arm in front of his face, allowing the hawk to land. Naruto then grabbed the scroll from the large bird and gave it a small apple piece from his wrist seal. The hawk ate it happily before giving a screech and flying off towards the Hokage tower. Naruto was ignoring his old friends as he read through the scroll. However, he had noticed that Kakashi, Asuma, Kurenai, and Guy had also appeared. Naruto read the scroll and sighed a bit. Tsunade wanted to run him ragged with all the missions he had been doing for the past few weeks, either to see how good he was or if it would make him quit Umbu, as he was one of her last living family, as she had discovered when she went to the pictures and flicked blood on them only to find nothing there. Yet quite weird when he had to explain to her about him being related to her. Although she has started to train him in chakra control since his was around hygiene control at best, and because of his Mokutan, which he hadn't told Tsunade about, he should be able to have perfect control sooner or later. However, while reading, there was a second option. He could go on a mission with Umbu Unit Delta, or he could train himself and get ready for his and Jiraiya's training trip. Deciding he could use the next few months to train would be good, he quickly summoned a crow to take the scroll towards the Hokage Tower with his answer. He then turned around and walked into a barbecue restaurant, making sure to use a seal on his cloth that changed his uniform for his regular civilian cloths, which were just a plain three-quarter shirt with an Uzumaki spiral on the hem of the shirt along with black pants that had bandages wrapped around the hems of the pants, and ordered some teriyaki chicken. Hey, getting you ribs healed makes you hungry. While Naruto entered the barbecue restaurant, he had forgotten that Teams 7, 8, 9, and 10 were staring at him in shock as he entered the restaurant. Kurenai now knew why he was wearing Umbu attire when he helped her and the rest of the girls set up Yu-Gi-Oh's party, but was curious why he wore it after leaving. Walking inside with her team, Kurenai watched as Naruto was eating his teriyaki chicken peacefully. Deciding to join him, Kurenai and her team walked towards Naruto's booth and sat down. Naruto looked quite surprised that they decided to sit with him, but shrugged it off and continued to eat. Team 8 had then ordered their meal and watched as Naruto pushed his plate towards them with a small smile. With a dig in from Naruto, Team 9 started to eat along with Naruto. Soon Team 7, 9, and 10 walked through the doors and made a beeline straight towards Naruto's table and sat down themselves. For a few minutes no one said anything other than their orders when another waitress went up towards their table and having some of the teriyaki that Naruto bought, which was a lot. However, Kakashi opened his mouth. So Naruto, why have you been avoiding team training? You know that if you don't go to training you won't get stronger, right? Asked Kakashi while looking at Naruto straight in the eyes. Naruto, however, tilted his head slightly. Kakashi, you know that I was promoted to Chunin, right? Then there was the fact you just saw my Umbu tattoo. I'm not on Team 7 anymore. You knew that, right? Asked Naruto with his head still tilted to the side as he stared at Kakashi, who had widened his one visible eye at that. Sasuke then clenched his jaw tight. The dead last became Chunin. That was the most absurd thing he heard. Sakura, however, needed to voice her displeasure. Naruto Baka, stop lying. If you are Chunin, that means that we should all be Jonin already. And whose Umbu cloths did you steal? Are you trying to make yourself look cool? Screeched Sakura as everyone winced in that area apart from Naruto as he released the chakra that held the silencing seal in his ears, originally used for sound shinobi, but it works just as well on Sakura. I got promoted during the Chunin exams and Gigi, when he was Hokage, decided to give me a dual promotion. I would be a Chunin and special Umbu, which let me go on Umbu missions and Chunin missions for the first few weeks, and then after I would become a full Umbu with all the benefits along with being able to become a Jonin instantly after I quit from Umbu. But until I quit from Umbu, I am still a Chunin on the official record, said Naruto, as he dipped some teriyaki into some chili sauce and ate it. All the senseis at the table were shocked. The dead last Naruto was an Umbu as an unofficial rank and Chunin as an official rank. It was amazing. Naruto, shouted Jiraiya as he popped up at the table from nowhere with a grin. It's good to see that you bought me lunch. That's a good student, said Jiraiya as he sat down to one of the vacant seats next to Naruto, as all the other Genin and Jonin sat in their own teams. Although everyone did hear Naruto mumble out, "You're not a teacher if you don't teach me anything," soon Tsunade had also entered along and also sat next to Naruto. Tsunade gripped Naruto by the cheek and started to pull his face. What did I hear about you creating a book? Asked Tsunade as she looked towards Jiraiya, who was grinning at him with a peace sign. Naruto in turn grinned back before pulling out his book. The Goddess Playmate. When Tsunade saw the book, she instantly let his cheek go and brought out her copy of it. If Naruto was the creator of the divine book, she was going to have him become her personal writer. After all, the plot of a mortal trying with all his might to be against a goddess who wants to take the main character for herself is actually a great plot. Where Naruto came up with the idea, she had no clue. Naruto in the next 5 minutes was surrounded by many women with their own copies of his book who were pleading that he signs them. Naruto just gave a goofy grin as he signed each and every book there. When Jiraiya watched Naruto sign multiple women's books, he started to internally cry. Naruto was getting women who wanted his signature. All he got were other males. Damn that kid. After a power hour of signing multiple books, along with other things, Naruto went back to eating his teriyaki like it was a normal day.